wanna give him 109 for following the legal line. Bitcoin Jesus paid his dues, now they tryna make him lose. Free fear, can't silence the truth. Free fear, breaking their own rules. Free fear, from prison to Spain, now they doing it again. First investor in the game, now they wanna kill his flame. Hired lawyers did it right, still they wanna pick a fight. Core devs changed the protocol, government wants total control. Attorney-client privilege dead, using compliance plans instead, yeah. First investor in the game, now they wanna kill his flame. Hired lawyers did it right, still they wanna pick a fight. Core devs changed the protocol, government wants total control. Attorney-client privilege dead, using compliance plans instead, yeah. Free fear. Free fear. Blockstream got the way back then. 1 meg blocks, remember when? Big blocks meant decentralized. Small blocks kept us paralyzed. Now they coming for the king, using laws like puppet strings. Spanish prison, McAfee died, making sure Veer stays inside. They can raid the lawyers, what? They can seize the files, yeah. But they can't stop crypto, nah. Running wild, running wild. Brownstone dropping truth bombs daily. System going crazy lately. Trying to lock up Bitcoin Jesus, but they cannot defeat us. Fear saw freedom in the code, now they wanna block his road. But the movement's too damn strong, and this persecution's wrong. Free fear. Free fear. Free fear. Free fear. Down on 9 years for following legal advice. That's not justice, that's a warning. Free Roger Ver.
From Silicon Valley to the Spanish shore, fighting for freedom, but they want something more. 10 months in prison just for speaking his mind. Now they're coming back trying to leave him behind. 109 years for following the law. Most corrupt case that you ever saw. They can't silence the truth, they can't change what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free, free Roger Ver. Free Roger now. Hired the best lawyers, did everything right. Still they raided offices in the dead of night. Used his own compliance as evidence of guilt. Now his freedom hangs on the empire they built. Speaking truth to power comes with a price, but we won't let them sacrifice. Oh, they can't silence the truth, they can't change what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free Roger Ver. Free Roger. Come for one of us, come for all. Either stand together now or watch freedom fall. They can't silence the truth, they can't chain what's right. Bitcoin Jesus showed us all how to stand up and fight. Free, free Roger, yeah. Free, yeah. Free Roger now.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to season 2 of the Air a Day show. I am trying to fix an echo. Does anybody hear an echo, or is it just me? Let's see here. For some reason, I'm in here twice. All right, can you hear me? This is very interesting. All right, here we are. Welcome to season 2, episode 1 of the Air a Day show. Tonight, we're going to be talking about freedom versus technocracy. And for some reason, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm having an echo. Let me pop out. Okay. Here we are. Can somebody let me know in the comments if they can hear me? Let me check this on my other device. Okay, you can hear me. Great. All right. Well, let's get going here. So there's actually quite a bit to go through. It's been a long time. I don't know if it's been like at least a month since I did one of these, and it seems like it's a completely different world, and trying to even just recap what's happened is going to be tough. But I'm going to walk through the purpose of tonight is actually just to kind of discuss the year ahead for 2025. 2024 was a busy year, to say the least. I mean, I think I ended up doing 50 interviews. We traveled to over 20 states, and then all of the stuff happened with Roger. I mean, it was intense. The year just flew by, and so now we're entering into 2025. And I know there are a lot of people that are really excited about the election outcome and think that the world is going to magically become a completely different and better place. And I've got some bad news on that front, and so I want to talk about what some of my concerns are and what the plan ahead is. I spent most of last year trying to onboard people to crypto, more particularly privacy solutions, and in the process learned that we really need to make our tools more user-friendly, which we're in the process of doing. And so for this year, it's about really ramping this up so that we can onboard consumers and merchants together at the same time in these workshops, and then figure out how to scale that to millions of people, which is obviously not going to be done through small workshops. But the point of the workshop is essentially to get feedback and to get real information back from consumers, from merchants, and to actually bring the technology partners into the workshops so that we can make these tools user-friendly, because that is without a doubt the number one issue that we face is usability. And so I'm going to walk through some of those issues. There are a ton of events happening, and I'm going to walk through the most immediate 4, although there are events lined up all the way kind of through the end of the year, particularly if you include going back to some of the same events that I did last year. The next event that I have is actually, the next 2 events are in Miami. The first is at the WAGMI, We're All Gonna Make It conference in Miami on January the 22nd through the 24th. This is, as I understand it, the largest blockchain conference in North America. There are expected to be 10,000 people at this event. So I'm going to be speaking at this event primarily on Roger and Roger's situation. So I'm not going to be talking about CBDCs, except to the extent that it dovetails with Roger's case. And then immediately following that, I'm going to be at the counterparty, the 25th and the 26th. And this is going to be a fantastic event. Tatiana's putting this event on, and it's going to be 200 or 300 people, but really focused on solutions. And so this is where I'm going to do kind of a mini abbreviated workshop, but there are going to be other people there talking about other facets of, not just privacy or not even just crypto, but different hands-on solutions to exiting and building. So in other words, this isn't going to be so much about politics and voting, but what we can actually do ourselves to avoid tyranny and to start building alternative systems. So I'm looking forward to that. And then immediately following that, I'm going to be in Mexico from the 29th through the 2nd of February. And this is also going to be very much a hands-on event where I'm going to be speaking and then also possibly doing a whole separate workshop as well. And so this is very much for people who have already made the decision that they're exiting and building and forming communities and looking for ways to work outside of the system. So obviously, as you can tell, there's a theme brewing here, which is, it's not about, changing the political narrative. It's about hands-on solutions and people actually adopting different ways of doing things outside of the existing systems. And then lastly, I'm going to be at Anarchapulco, which is, the main event is February the 17th through the 21st. And so looking forward to that. That's going to be I've never actually been to Anarchapulco, but I know a lot of people that have been there, and it seems like it's a pretty intense experience. And, certainly the event itself has gone through a lot of evolution over the years, but I encourage you to check that out. There are going to be some very interesting speakers there as well. And I might also do a workshop there. I'm trying to figure out all of the logistics. So basically, in 12 days, I'm going to be on the road, and then I don't really see it letting up much throughout the rest of the year. And in fact, I think I'm only going to be back 10 days during the first quarter. So it's pretty intense and quite a bit of stuff going on. I do want to go through a quick update on Roger's situation, which I can't even remember the last time I did this podcast, so I won't go through all of it. But if you haven't already, go to freerogernow.org and sign the open letter. Again, these signatures are very important and very helpful. We know that President Trump is committed to commuting Ross's sentence on day 1. I just saw something about maybe as many as 1,000 J6ers also. So there's obviously a huge and kind of unprecedented list. I'm not aware of any historical precedent where a president coming in actually pardons people, and particularly at that scale. So the issue that for us is twofold. We need to really raise awareness on Roger's situation, which we got kind of a late start. So we're trying to make sure we make enough noise and get the information to the right people, and to try to figure out a way to get onto that list. And so again, go to freerogernow.org. You can not only sign the open letter, but this is where you can get all of the most recent information about what's going on with the case. In fact, his legal team submitted a motion to dismiss the case, which they asked for a hearing on January the 6th, which I thought was a great date, but that didn't happen. But what I've heard recently is that there may be a hearing on this in February. So there is movement. And so, I want to recap kind of 3 quick ways that you can help with Roger's situation is, again, sign and share the open letter. The other thing is I'm working on trying to get letters, formal letters, pardon letters, recommendation letters that I can, put into a package, and others are also collecting these signatures to try to get to Trump. So these are letters from, politicians or people that are kind of high profile. Think people that Trump would be impressed with, or Trump's team would be impressed with if they saw, a letter. And so what I will say on this is I've been going through this process. I've been going through there are a lot of organizations out there that will lobby for pardons based on whatever the particular incident is, if it's a drug-related offense or it's a criminal case that meets certain profiles. But typically, these pardons happen post-conviction, after you've exhausted all of your legal outcomes. And so a lot of these folks are not quite ready to get on board just because of where Roger's case is. Roger hasn't gone through the full trial. He has not been convicted of anything. And who knows, he may not be convicted of anything, but what we're going for is called a preemptive pardon. And there is a precedent for this. In fact, Trump has issued preemptive pardons before. I believe Mark Rich and Roger Stone are 2 examples. And we are hearing that Biden may be issuing a number of preemptive pardons, including to, unfortunately, people like Anthony Fauci. So nevertheless, it's going to be a different group of people so I'm talking to a lot of people at the New Hampshire state political level that are actually putting together these letters, and I'm going to be reaching out to others. So if you have some people that you think would be interested in doing a more formal letter, the letter itself will remain confidential. We're not going to post these recommendation letters publicly. Just reach out to me and DM me, and I will integrate you into a process. I've got a template letter and everything already, and we can just kind of move that out. And then the last thing that you can do is just like and share the content. So there's a kind of a never-ending stream. There's been a lull because of the holidays, but there's quite a bit going on. There have been countless interviews on this, and I don't know if I'll talk about that in a second, but there have been some very high-profile interviews, and there are more to come. And I know I've probably talked about Roger, but even before this formal initiative, my involvement independent of the Free Roger campaign, I've been talking about this since May. So, but they're really picking up in terms of more high-profile cases. There are really 3 main paths to victory for Roger. One is to get a preemptive pardon. The other is that the DOJ just drops the case. And, that's probably the easiest. And I think if you might have heard a couple of days ago, it was announced that there are a whole bunch of people in the Biden administration, in the DOJ, that are planning on resigning on day 1. And I actually put out a tweet about this. And so it may very well be that some of the people that put together this shoddy, fabricated case against Roger just resign. And so this case, when somebody objective looks at it with new eyes from a new DOJ, they may look at this and say, this case is ridiculous, and just throw it out. So that is a real viable alternative. I don't know that we have much control over that, at this point, until people are actually in place, but that's another alternative. And the other is Roger could win his extradition. So it's kind of a weird thing that's going on there, and it's a very weird process. For me, this has been interesting, just trying to learn how all of this works, given, as a free stater and activist, I'm used to dealing with a lot of different legal situations, but this is one where, while Roger's not even a U.S. citizen, and then you're dealing with Spanish law. And so I guess my understanding is, Roger will get a letter in the mail or something, or he'll be notified one day that either he won his extradition case and he's free, or they're just going to arrest him. It's pretty much a binary situation, but there is very much still a chance that Roger could actually win his extradition case. So those are at least 3 paths to victory. So some things that I want everybody to be aware of. There's some other things going on as well. So if you're following the Free Ian case, there is a rally coming up on, let me see here, January the 16th. So next week, next Thursday, 10 a.m. to noon in Concord, New Hampshire. And so there's a rally to support him at the New Hampshire State House. And so you can go to freeiannow.org. I encourage you to sign the petition for Ian there, as well as, if you want, sign up and attend this event. I can't make that event. However, I am going to the next event, which is there are oral arguments in his appeal hearing. So there's actually movement on his case. And I'm not going to rehash. You can go to freeiannow.org and learn more about the case and the specifics of it. But Ian has a ridiculous case. I mean, and he has a really good shot at winning this on appeal. In fact, his case is absurd. So the fact that it's even been going on this long. So this first appeal hearing is going to be Wednesday, February the 5th, and it's going to be in Boston. And so you can see there's a Facebook group for this. So I guess just search Ian Freeman oral arguments. And I think this page was just put up. So, I mean, if you follow me, I'll certainly share any kind of official links or promotional information about this hearing. But it's great if we can get a good turnout for this. I mean, I know when Ian had a sentencing hearing, it was packed. They actually had to have an overflow room. So I think it's important and helpful to show support and, you know, maybe a little bit of optimism there. And who knows, you know, Ross Ulbricht might actually be out by the time Ian has his appeal hearing. So the purpose, the theme for tonight was freedom versus technocracy. And you know, I will tell you, I'm really conflicted about this whole situation, because on the one hand, you know, I'm trying to push to get a pardon from Roger from Trump, and then on the other hand, Trump is about to implement some absolutely horrendous crypto policies, and I don't think he's doing it intentionally. I think he just hasn't had access to alternative information about this. And actually, this is why I believe, at least in part, Roger is in the situation that he's in, because he wrote Hijacking Bitcoin. And that is a big threat to central banks. It's a big threat to the establishment finance. And so, you know, just as Roger published the book and was going to begin doing kind of a mainstream effort of promotion, he gets arrested in Spain and essentially has a gag order put on him. And right after that happened, just a few months after that, you had this big Bitcoin conference in Nashville, Tennessee, and you had all these people. You had Trump, you had RFK Jr., you had Michael Saylor, and you had just this whole huge showing, but all pushing only one narrative, which is that, you know, Bitcoin is it. Bitcoin is the only solution. And now we're talking about a Bitcoin strategic reserve and everything else. And so on the one hand, it's like, well, you know, Trump's come out pro Bitcoin and we want Roger to get a pardon. At the same time, it is my personal opinion that if Trump actually understood the facts, the true facts of the situation, he wouldn't want to pursue many of the things that he's pursuing from a crypto policy perspective. And I'm going to go through what those are. And I've racked my brains about it. It's like, well, you know, on the one hand, it's like, don't rock the boat. But on the other hand, it's, well, yeah, but if the lawfare against Roger is actually related to this, and we're about to see possibly the rapid acceleration of really bad policy. And when I say this, there's an executive order that's been, well, Trump didn't draft it, somebody else drafted it for him, but there's an executive order for him to sign for a Bitcoin strategic reserve on day one. Trump has already stated that he wants to put in place regulation in the first 100 days to provide clear rules of the road. Well, that may sound good depending upon whether you've read any of the legislation or not, but I'm going to go through some of this. What actually is being proposed is not great at all. It's especially not great if you're interested in privacy or if you're interested in self-custody crypto. It's actually a disaster. And so I've been working for a while now, for several weeks, on an article, because I guess my approach is, my feeling on this is that Trump just hasn't had access to the alternative view. If the only people that you're hearing from are Michael Saylor or, you know, the Winklevoss twins or whatever, or Max Kaiser, not saying that Max Kaiser is providing an insight, you're really not going to be informed. You're going to think that, well, gee, everybody thinks this is great and this is the only situation. So I want to try to outline what I'm concerned about. And I'm also concerned at a higher level just about, you know, I think we're walking into accelerated technocracy just by virtue of the fact that Trump is surrounded by a whole variety of people from the PayPal mafia. I mean, his AI and crypto czar was from the PayPal mafia. Peter Thiel basically inserted JD Vance in as his VP. If you follow the track record on this, Peter Thiel literally was JD Vance's mentor. And then after being his mentor, JD Vance worked at Peter Thiel's venture capital firm. Then he went off and started his own venture capital firm. Peter Thiel was an investor in that. Then Peter Thiel put $15 million into his Senate campaign. So literally Thiel introduced Vance to Trump. And Thiel is also a major shareholder in Palantir. So this isn't, you know, I'm not talking about this being a theory. And then Elon Musk is also part of the PayPal mafia. So this is actually pretty concerning because I'm seeing a lot of people cheer this on. Stuff that people were saying, oh, we don't want this. We don't want social credit scores. We don't want all these dystopian things under Biden. They're now requesting, provided that it's under Trump's people and Trump's pick. So with that said, I'm going to walk through some of the aspects of this and some of the things that are in the article. And I want to start by talking about this Bitcoin strategic reserve. So this is called the Bitcoin Act of 2024. And Cynthia Loomis, the senator from Wyoming, drafted this. And the essence of this Bitcoin strategic reserve is that the federal government will purchase 1 million Bitcoin over 5 years and will use gold, the sale of gold, and some of the Federal Reserve earnings sent to the Treasury to pay for it. And so the next point about it is that the holding period is that the U.S. government won't sell the Bitcoin for at least 20 years. And then from a security perspective, they're going to actually store the private keys in a network of vaults that the Treasury will operate all over the United States. Now, there are multiple problems with this. And I think I've said this before as an analogy. If Nancy Pelosi went on TV and said, hey, well, let me say one other thing. Cynthia Loomis has somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 worth of Bitcoin personally in her own holdings. So this would be the equivalent of if Nancy Pelosi drafted a bill and held a press conference that says, hey, you're going to buy, I'm asking the United States government to buy, $1 trillion worth of my stock portfolio and hold it for 20 years. I mean, in essence, it's very similar. It's absolute cronyism. I mean, if a Democrat did this, Republicans would be absolutely beside themselves. They would be calling her an Ayn Rand, villain. It would be, an extreme example of crony capitalism. But then outside of that, it's not a good investment. And this is, and I don't want to wade into the whole fork war thing. And this isn't even about, small blocks or big blocks anymore, or even about the market making a choice. When you are using taxpayer money and you have basically a whole bunch of people now coming in and investing a lot of money to bribe politicians to buy your particular coin, now you're in the realm of using force. You're using taxpayer theft at a time when we have $36 trillion in debt. And so it's absolutely true that Bitcoin was hijacked. That's undeniable. Bitcoin was originally supposed to be digital cash. Now it's marketed as digital gold. And you may say, okay, well, I'm okay with digital gold, and that's fine. But you're now not making the choice for yourself. You're now trying to force everyone else to make this choice using taxpayer money. Although I would also argue, and this I'll get into this in the article as well, it's really slow, expensive, non-fungible surveillance digital gold. And I think it's important to highlight that. So even if you buy this Bitcoin as digital gold narrative, you have to understand there's some downside to even its attributes as digital gold. One, clearly it can be tracked. There was a Zero Hedge article yesterday. Somebody's being forced to turn over their private keys to $124 million worth of Bitcoin, or they're going to get thrown in prison. We obviously have Ross, Ian, countless other people. I mean, the cat's out of the bag on this. They are using chain analysis. They can track people's transactions. Bitcoin is a public ledger, and they have invested a lot of time and a lot of money to diagram people's transactions. And while there are steps that you can take to, try to hide your, identity, most people don't know to do it, and to actually require that amount of additional work isn't really feasible. And so in essence, we're in a situation right now where Bitcoin's not even fungible, because one Bitcoin is not the same as another Bitcoin. They can flag if they say, well, hey, these Bitcoin were used in illegal activity, or maybe part of a pool of Bitcoin that were used in illegal activity, then they flag those addresses. And now all of a sudden exchanges can't be involved with it, and merchants can't be involved in it, or they have legal liability. And so this is a significant downside to Bitcoin, even under this digital gold narrative. So it is not fungible. It is completely trackable. But there's another aspect of this that people should be really concerned about, because if you're buying into this digital gold narrative, and I see this with people interacting on social media all the time, the big selling feature now, and what Michael Saylor is going to say, is it's the hardest asset known to man because there's a fixed cap of 21 million coins. That's not true. You can change with a couple of lines of code the amount of the supply of Bitcoin. And people will argue that, oh, well, no one will agree to that, and that would be impossible. You have to understand, people already agreed to neutering this thing to the point where it's gone from something that was supposed to be used as cash with low transaction fees and high volumes all over the world to being digital gold that's slow and expensive. That's already a massive hijacking, right? To go from digital cash to not being useful as a medium of exchange, that's actually probably a bigger deal than going from there's 21 million to then whatever they're going to say the new supply is. But I'm going to also tell you that they're going to have to increase the supply. Now, there's something really interesting that happened. There was recently an HBO documentary that tried to make this case that a guy named Peter Todd is Satoshi Nakamoto. Well, here's part of why that might have happened, or maybe this is just a consequence of it. If you read the book Hijacking Bitcoin, what you'll find is that Peter Todd is one of the guys that was involved in creating what I'll call a cap and trade system for Bitcoin, where you have small blocks and then you basically auction off. You use replace by fee. So if you want to get your transaction through in this artificially scarce, this artificial scarcity environment where you can only do 7 transactions per second, then people have to auction that off. Well, Peter Todd was paid by someone with ties to intelligence to make that change, to add that auction capability that basically cemented high fees for Bitcoin. Well, this HBO documentary tried to paint the picture that Peter Todd is Satoshi. And so what happens by pushing that narrative to the public is it then negates what Roger's saying in his book, because what they were trying to say is Peter Todd is Satoshi, and there was no one from the intelligence community that was funding or pushing Peter Todd to make these changes to Bitcoin. It was just Peter Todd talking to himself, trying to psych everybody out, not because he didn't want to reveal that he was Satoshi. So understand, this is what's going on. So this movie goes out right after, Rogers was thrown in prison, then he's out on bail, and now he can't talk about it. And now this movie from HBO is trying to tell this narrative about this guy named Peter Todd being Satoshi. But there's another important point to Peter Todd potentially being Satoshi. One of the things that Peter Todd has been a public advocate for is increasing the amount of the supply of Bitcoin beyond 21 million. He has actually written proposals for this, and he has been a public advocate for this. So already, if you're looking at this from the outside, and in fact, as someone who's traveled around the country talking to people about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, I can tell you that people are completely unaware of hijacking Bitcoin. Most people don't even know that people were actually using Bitcoin as a currency. That is the overwhelming percentage of people in the United States. And now, not knowing any of the history, not knowing any of the backstory, not hearing anything out of hijacking Bitcoin, now they're seeing, oh, there's an HBO documentary, and it's saying that this guy might be Satoshi. And the guy that says that HBO is saying might be Satoshi. And by the way, there was even a Poly market about this, about, well, who in this HBO documentary is going to emerge as being Satoshi? And I think Peter Todd showed, I can't remember, I think he might have showed up in first place or second place. But I mean, there was a whole clearly orchestrated event here about, hey, let's get this prediction market going. Let's get buzz about this. Let's get this going through social media, and then let's push this out on HBO. And so now people that are new to Bitcoin, as Bitcoin is now in the public space, because, you know, Trump's talking about it, RFK's talking about it, Michael Saylor's talking about it. Now people are they're starting to be exposed to are these ideas that, oh, hey, this Peter Todd guy might be Satoshi. And Peter Todd thinks that we are going to need more than 21 million Bitcoin. And so what I'm saying is they're already planting the seeds. You're already starting to see the propaganda campaign, and you're already starting to see the information get out there about 21 million not being a fixed supply of Bitcoin. They will have to increase the supply of Bitcoin, because since they've kept the blocks artificially small, you can't have very many transactions. And as a result of that, the whole point of the block rewards to begin with, where miners solve these math puzzles and they earn Bitcoin for solving these math puzzles, and the number of Bitcoin that they earn decreases it gets cut in half every 4 years. Well, the whole point of the block reward to begin with was to be a subsidy to encourage miners to start securing the network. But the subsidy goes away, and miners were the overall business model for a miner was to be from earning fees from processing millions of transactions every 10 minutes. Well, when they decided to artificially cap the number of transactions at 7 transactions per second, that means that there's a cap as to the amount of fees that the miners are going to be able to earn. And you can only charge so much. I mean, it actually gets to the point where Bitcoin as digital gold is more expensive to move than physical gold. It actually loses its appeal even as a store of value relative to physical gold, so provided that you keep this artificial cap on the transactions per second. So they're going to need, probably by the time there's the next halving, miners are going to be in a real difficult situation unless the speculative value of the price keeps on going up. The transaction fee revenue isn't going to be there. And so all of these companies that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars building data centers aren't going to be able to pay their electricity bills. And so then what they're going to say is, well, you know, we're going to need to keep these mining rewards going for just a little bit longer. And, you know, what they'll say first is, you know, a lot of people have lost their coins. And so maybe 25% or whatever the number of Bitcoin have already been lost. So let's just add those back in as block rewards, because, you know, we're still not technically beyond 21 million actual outstanding coins that are really in circulation, because some of these coins aren't in circulation. And then it begins. And so anyway, this is kind of a long rant, but this is a way of saying they're already laying the groundwork for increasing the supply cap. So if you're somebody out there saying, well, gee, should the government be using taxpayer theft to buy digital gold? I'm suggesting to you that it's, you know, it's surveillance, non-fungible digital gold that probably will end up not having a fixed supply. So it's something that, you know, that argument and this information needs to get out into the public, because the overwhelming majority of people do not know what I just said. And there's something else going on. I don't know how this fits necessarily in the technocracy versus freedom camp, but I want to explain one of the problems that we have in crypto, and this is what I see happening and showing up as a real red flag and a risk factor, is we don't call out scams. I mean, I usually say it's 99% of crypto that gives the other 1% a bad name, but it's actually true. I mean, it's just one Ponzi scheme after another. I mean, there's this guy, CoffeeZilla, who has a YouTube channel, and all he does is expose these scams, but it's, you know, FTX and almost every exchange and all of these influencers that do, you know, NFT coins or meme coins. I mean, it's gotten to the point where we have a culture where young people are actually growing up, you know, wanting to become influencers. And if you're an influencer who happens to do a rug pull, that's not actually seen as a bad thing. There are people that actually aspire to be an influencer that does a rug pull and rips people off. And this is a problem, and this is highly problematic. And so we need to call these things out. But I see something as it relates to crypto policy and CBDCs that's very alarming. People really need to take a look at Tether. And I've done a deep dive on this. And, you know, a lot of what I've been doing in writing this article is just double checking my research and actually reaching out to people and making sure that all of these things are true. There is a massive red alarm bell ahead with Tether. And if you're not familiar with Tether, Tether is what's called a stable coin. So a stable coin is a coin where one coin equals $1. So the whole point of it is it's a token that is supposed to be backed by assets, whether it's treasuries or cash or whatever it is, but on a one-to-one basis, so that people have a stable coin. They have an actual token that they can use instead of using the banking system. And there's a reason for stable coins. The banking system is horrible, particularly if you're doing international banking. I mean, the banking system in general is a nightmare. I mean, obviously we have all of the debanking that's going on. We have all of the fees. But if you're doing any kind of international business, it's actually really difficult. It's very expensive and very time consuming to send dollars from a bank in one country to another. So to a certain degree, well, hey, great, we now have a token, a digital token that we can instantly send with low fees, but that's backed by the dollar, or so we think. The problem is, the more I dig into this, like, this is a pretty massive scam. I mean, we're talking about an order of magnitude bigger than Bernie Madoff level scam. And the issue with this is Tether now has a market cap as of today of $137 billion. So I believe it's the third largest cryptocurrency by market cap. And the problem is, and I'm not going to go into the background of some of the people that founded it, and I will in the article, but Tether has never successfully passed an audit. Never. And in fact, on a couple of occasions, on one occasion, the New York Attorney General issued a $18.5 million fine for commingling funds and for misrepresenting the backing of the coin. The CFTC issued a $41 million fine for misleading statements and found that they only had reserves for 27.6% of the days where they sampled the reserves of Tether. And so this is a situation where this company's never gone through an audit successfully. What they do is they get what's called an attestation, but this thing gets even worse the more you dig into it. There's a company called iFinex, which is an investor in Tether and also an investor and owns a crypto exchange called Bitfinex. And Bitfinex, is a place where people go to buy and sell Tether, and also they have a market for buying and selling Bitcoin in Tether. And so, I mean, it's been documented that in some of these cases where they've done this attestation, basically what you had is this crypto exchange, Bitfinex, wiring money to Tether so that Tether could show in a snapshot that in a particular moment in time, it actually had the reserves. And then the next day, Tether sent the money back to Bitfinex. And so this is a pretty big problem, because the implications here are that basically Tether's like the Federal Reserve. They're printing these tokens out of thin air that aren't backed by anything. And then people are using these Tether to then buy Bitcoin, which is driving up the price of Bitcoin. And so there's a pretty big issue with this, and I'm sure you can probably see what happens. And at this point, Tether's one of allegedly the largest owners of U.S. Treasuries. So if something happens and it is uncovered that Tether isn't what people think, it's actually going to have a systematic effect. It's going to bring down crypto, but it's also going to bring down the broader market, including treasuries. Now, what's interesting about this is, one, we should call out scams, and I am calling this out. I encourage everybody to look at this and to do your own research. And as I said, I'm going to put out a more thorough article about this. But it gets worse. So now when we're talking about the Trump administration, we have this guy Howard Lutnick, and Howard Lutnick Trump has appointed as Commerce Secretary. He was actually running for, he wanted to be Treasury Secretary, but he looks like he only ended up getting Commerce Secretary. And so nevertheless, that's still a very powerful position involved with trade relationships, and certainly is something that is related to and overlaps Tether's area of influence. But there's some other interesting things about this. Lutnick's firm, Cantor Fitzgerald, is the custodian for Tether's U.S. Treasuries. And he also just led Tether's last round. He invested $600 million in Tether. So we actually have a situation right now where we have a stable coin that's never completed a successful audit, that has already been fined by the New York Attorney General and the CFTC for not having the reserves that they claimed that they had. Tether has just been banned from the EU. And now we have somebody in the Trump administration who's part of the cabinet, is a lead investor and allegedly managing the treasuries. This is not the kind of situation that you want. This has kind of disastrous effects in one of two ways. And I can actually see this playing out a variety of ways. And it plays into the actual, what I think is coming up from a legislative perspective that relates to Tether and also relates to this Bitcoin strategic reserve. The number one Republican who has been pushing crypto legislation in the Senate, hands down, is Cynthia Lummis. She is the woman that I mentioned who drafted the bill for the Bitcoin strategic reserve. She's also 2 times put together a bill in conjunction with Democrat Senator Gillibrand from New York, the Lummis-Gillibrand bill. And this bill is not a great bill if you are interested in self-custody crypto. It's not a great bill if you're interested in privacy. And I'm not going to go into all aspects of the bill, although I do encourage you to read it, and or if not, at least get the whole bill and put it into AI and play around with it and start asking it questions, because I think you're going to be shocked by what you see. But as it relates to stable coins, understand this, and I've written about this as well. A stable coin issued by JP Morgan Chase, or one of the large banks, is indistinguishable from a central bank digital currency. If you have one of the largest owners, presumably, since we don't know who owns the Federal Reserve, but we have a pretty good guess. If you have one of the largest owners of the Federal Reserve issuing a programmable digital token that can be censored and tracked, then that's really not that much different than a CBDC. In fact, it's the same from the standpoint of what consumers don't like about CBDCs, which is trackability, censorability, and programmability. So in essence, when you read this Lummis-Gillibrand bill, the 3 big things that it does is this. It says, unless you're if you're a non-depository trust company, in other words, unless you're an official registered large financial institution that's checked all the boxes and gone through this really draconian process, by the way, to get approval for this in the United States, unless you've done that, you're not able to offer more than $10 billion worth of stable coins. So now I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here, but obviously if Tether has $137 billion worth of stable coins out there, obviously they're beyond this $10 billion cap. And so in a way, this piece of legislation is going after Tether. And you might say, well, hey, that's a good thing because it sounds like Tether's a scam. The problem is when you look at it, well, if you look at how this legislation is drafted, you can see a couple of potential outcomes. And so you either have to fit below the $10 billion cap, or you have to go through federal oversight and approval. And to go through federal oversight and approval, I mean, again, it's a massive list. It means you have to go through all of this scrutiny. You have to open up all of your books. And there are other terms and conditions with it that frankly restrict innovation and make stablecoins not altogether useful. And so in the end, what this is going to do is basically force a situation where somebody like a Tether is going to have to be acquired by somebody like a JP Morgan Chase, by an existing depository trust company. And let's think about it. If they have $137 billion of assets, allegedly, again, this to me sounds like one of those bailout situations like with TARP, where imagine there's a disaster, Tether starts to falter a little bit, and now you've got this guy who's Lutnick, who's the Commerce Secretary. You've got everybody saying, oh, Tether's really big. This is systemic risk. We've got to bail them out. And then all of a sudden, we end up with a taxpayer-funded bailout of Tether, where at the end of it, taxpayers are putting up money to cover the reserves that Tether doesn't have. And JP Morgan ends up controlling Tether, which is essentially a backdoor CBDC. So I know as I'm laying this out, it's a little bit complex, which is why this article has been fairly lengthy to lay out. But it's all here in black and white what is going on. I mean, this, you can read the bill yourself. There's no lack of clarity. I'm not connecting dots that aren't there. It's very clearly laid out in this bill how they view stablecoins, and it's even being positioned as, oh well, you know, it'll be great if America leads the way in stablecoins. And so people are it's very easy for something that's this technically complex for people to fall in line and all of a sudden buy into the idea of, oh yeah, I'm anti CBDC, I'm pro bank issued stablecoin, not realizing that you're actually supporting the same thing. And that is exactly the path that we're on. So my concern is all of this could happen in the first 100 days. In fact, it'll either all happen in the first 100 days or it probably won't happen at all. I think this is generally the case for most of Trump's agenda, because, you know, usually once the administration gets in, you have momentum and you have a lot of, you know, political capital to begin with, but it's going to get tough. There are going to be a lot of things thrown at you. And as we get closer to, you know, midterm elections, people are immediately going to be less willing or likely to support bold policy. And then it's just a whole bunch of people, you know, fighting each other and jockeying for position until the midterms. And so this is why I'm pointing this out. So I'm going to write this article. I'm going to lay all this out. And my intention is, and my assumption is that I don't think, you know, Trump is aware of any of this, because I don't know where he would have heard about this. He certainly wouldn't have heard about this from his anybody in his inner circle. He wouldn't have heard about it from anybody that's a Bitcoin maxi. He certainly wouldn't have heard about it from Cynthia Loomis. The only people that he would have heard about it from are people like me, who I've been talking about this, but I haven't done the full deep dive, and someone like Roger. And so this is why I think it's important for this stuff to get out. I'm going to add somebody to the stage. There you are.
Hey, Aaron. My apologies for being so late. We had family festivities tonight with the brother's birthday. So,
oh no problem. It was all last minute anyway. So I was
amazing topic. So I'm anxious to hear what you have to say about this.
Well, yeah. So what I'm trying to do is, and I won't go through the whole recap, but I was starting by talking about Roger's situation and the fact that it's tough, because on the one hand, we're trying to get a pardon for Roger from Trump, and Trump's been pro Bitcoin and pro crypto, but at the same time, the lawfare against Roger in part is due to his exposing Bitcoin. And so how do you deal with this? And my concern is, I think that the first 100 days of Trump are going to be where all the bad stuff happens. Where, in other words, unless we're able to lay out what's actually going on here and show kind of an alternative explanation of what Bitcoin is all about and what these stable coins is all about, then the damage is going to be done right away. And it's going to have really negative implications for a lot of things. And so I'm trying to give the highlight for this. I've been working on this article. I've been doing a lot of research on Tether, which the more that I've done, it's unbelievable. And it's one of those things where, a lot of people say, well, we've been hearing about FUD for a long time. Well, people heard about FUD about Madoff for a long time. Some of us were talking about FTX for years before. FTX was obviously going to be a disaster if you were looking at how the business model operated from that perspective, and not, well, they must be doing great because Tom Brady's doing commercials, right? And so the Tether situation is bad, and the concern is that they cover it up by basically, buying a Treasury secretary, buying into Rumble, and then kind of, if there's a really big mess, papering it over because they've become systemically important based on the number of treasuries they own.
I couldn't agree more. The Tether, unwinding Tether would create a giant hit to the entire crypto market. And I think we forget how much Tether has supported Bitcoin along the way during its down or bear markets, if you will. And it's kind of ironic because we know that Tether's, asset backing, shall we say, is in question, to say it mildly. But the along the way, Tether's ability to print and people to have faith that it was backed, it allowed them to continually buy Bitcoin and buy additional assets. And exit to the next level, I believe that they've allowed them to not only stuff their pockets, but start stuffing their pockets of regulators around the world. and they're probably on their payroll to give them the pass, or to not look too deeply into their financials, or push them through various court actions to try to verify their audits. The banking location for Tether is a prime example, being the shared bank that FTX used. So it's one of those things that sooner or later the truth is going to come out, and when it does, it's going to be a giant hit, an epic hit to the entire crypto market.
I agree. And you brought up a really interesting point, which is, I was saying earlier how, okay, not the Bitcoin was hijacked, but you may be okay with it being hijacked. You may be okay with the digital gold argument, except there are a couple of problems with the digital gold argument. If you're buying into the digital gold because it's been a good store of value, but the store of value was because the price went up because people were printing Tether out of thin air to pump it, that might make you look a little bit differently about how great it is as a store of value, meaning that there really wasn't organic demand for it. It was actually completely fabricated. But then on top of that, the fact that you can track Bitcoin and it's non-fungible because you can track it. I mean, you throw all of this together, and the fact that the 21 million supply cap, that can be changed with 2 lines of code. And I was explaining that this whole HBO story about trying to make Peter Todd out to be Satoshi, what that does is it negates some of Roger's arguments in his book about Peter Todd being influenced by deep state actors to make changes to Bitcoin. And it also, Peter Todd has been a proponent of increasing the 21 million supply. He's put out proposals. He's been a longtime advocate of this. Well, now if you're new to crypto and you're new to Bitcoin, this is what you've heard. Hey, I saw this guy might be Satoshi. He was on HBO. He's put out a proposal that says we need more than 21 million Bitcoin. BlackRock said that too. And so, so now all of a sudden, those changes get made. So it's not the digital. It's not even great as digital gold is, I guess, my argument.
Right. Well, it really unravels a lot of what we always talk about, blockchain, meaning that, it's immutable, it can't be changed, it's censorship resistant, be all the good things, borderless and open, all of the good things that we talk about blockchain and its birth out of Bitcoin that was supposed to be just that. But now when you start talking about changing the supply, and that has been the story since nearly day one, that the supply is capped. The supply will never go beyond that. And like you said, it truly is just 2 lines of code.
It is 2 lines of code.
Pretty scary.
Yeah, and that's Saylor's whole narrative. It's the hardest asset ever known to man because of the 21 million cap. So anyway, I know this is probably a little jumbled, but this is why this is going to be a detailed article. And I do hope people read it, but more importantly, I'm going to push to try to get to people that I know are around. There are 4 people that can be helpful for this, in my opinion. And my honest belief is that they just haven't been exposed. I don't think this is malicious. I actually don't think they're pushing this. But RFK's exposure to Bitcoin comes from his running mate Shanahan, whose boyfriend is the CEO of a Lightning Network company. So a Bitcoin company, in essence. And so RFK's exposure and his primary information source is somebody that is directly related to Bitcoin and who benefits from actually Bitcoin being slow and expensive and having small blocks. And if you look at who surrounds Trump, and again, this is the thing that frustrates me. When the Bitcoin conference was going on in Nashville, I was tweeting out, I created a bunch of memes and bite-sized information from Hijacking Bitcoin because just from the frustration of the fact that I didn't think people talk a lot about in the COVID world about informed consent. Well, I don't think people have informed consent about what they're buying with Bitcoin. I don't think they know what they're buying. And it is clear that the other story and the other narrative has been suppressed. It continues to be suppressed. So I'm putting a full effort into this one article. And I will say, I don't want to spend a lot of time in politics. I don't believe that there's a political solution, but I also think that, in the next 100 days, this could be a catastrophic situation. And so that's kind of what I was laying out on that front. And this fits into technocracy. I was starting to get into this. I guess I don't have slides for that, but I was talking a bit about the influence the PayPal mafia has on Trump. And so again, JD Vance is completely
I was
tied
getting
to
ready to say, right. Even the selection of JD Vance.
even the selection. And so, and if you look at what's going on, and I know a lot of people were excited about, Elon Musk and, oh, we have a free speech platform. We do not have a free speech platform. It is very clear within the last week, if Elon doesn't like what you say about a topic that directly intersects with his interests, he will ban you and he will actually change the algorithm. He's shown us that. That is not a free speech platform, period. And as I've been saying, it's limited reach, but it goes beyond that. I mean, now it's not just it's outright bans, demonetization, and people have to understand. And I'll compile all this at some point, but not now, not probably for the next 100 days. But when Elon bought Twitter, he convinced everybody that he's doing this because he believes that civilization will fail unless we have a free speech platform. That was the front-facing narrative. The reality is, at the same time, he said, China has WeChat. WeChat is an everything app. It's a social media app. It's what you use to pay all of your bills. It is literally an everything app. He bought X to turn it into an everything app. This was not a patriotic play. That's the marketing pitch. The marketing pitch is that he bought this to be a censorship-free platform. But his original design, it's not like he's like, oh, I'm going to spend $44 million. He knew full well that if he bought this and turned this into a platform, he would control payments, he would control video, he would control all of the communication, and he would have a situation where he would have billions of people providing their data voluntarily that he owns and throws into his AI, which is the primary business model of Tesla. So anybody who is still believing this patriotic bullshit has to go back and look at, this was not a charity. This was not effective altruism. This was, look, I wouldn't fault the guy for making a business decision. I mean, if he wanted the everything app, here's the problem with it being the everything app. The problem with it being the everything app is, I will tell you, we sit here and we say, oh, well, we don't want to have a social credit score. Well, what do you think it is when the algorithms, when you're deboosted based on what type of content you put out there? And if you're indexed based on the type of content, that is a social credit score. We don't know what the score is, just as I would say, we already have a social credit score. In the United States, it's the tax code, which is 16 million words and 75,000 pages. And we get thrown in jail if we don't comply. It's almost impossible to comply because of how big it is, but we don't have a score. So China's really bad because they have an app. We're even worse because we have even more rules. We don't know what they are. We don't have an app. And if we're wrong, we go to jail. That's today where we are. But this everything app. So now all of a sudden, people will talk about, well, Klaus Schwab, and if the UN does this, well, if you say something wrong, and they'll show, the credit card terminal at the grocery store where you said something wrong online and now you can't pay for your groceries. Well, what do you think X payments is when your X payments get shut off because you get banned because you say something that Elon doesn't like, that's anti-H1B or anti-technocracy? How is that any different? I mean, we are literally signing up for this. Anyway,
I would agree with you in that. I think that's been his plan from a long time ago, to have an everything. Just the reason, like he acquired X.com, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, because he had a vision for using that domain. And I think he had a vision for some kind of payment solution that would merge with Tesla early on. He could see into the future that, self-driving cars will be used for income generation for an owner or ownership or a fleet, whatever. And why not have a payment, app along with that, going back to his PayPal days. So he has this vision all along. I'm going to give you just a little bit of pushback in that, but I don't know. It could have been strategy too. having lived in California myself, and Elon being in California, he saw the detriment of having a single party rule and a majority rule in Sacramento, in their capital, and how detrimental that was to the economy. So he did flee to Texas to escape that. And having said that, I think he, being maybe a little bit contrary in his investment, he bought X to try to obtain or maybe bring some freedom of speech to a platform that it didn't exist. There was a lot of censorship to those on the political right. So I think he had maybe some motive there to either obtain more users into his everything app that he eventually wants to roll out, or he a contrary investor. Maybe this is how I can bring more people in, or maybe there is somewhat of a foundational belief, a core belief in freedom of speech, albeit limited. So I don't know, what his true motives are all the way through and through. But we are fooling ourselves if we think X is a freedom of speech platform. It is nothing.
We can look at what he said. He has said that he is for UBI. He has said he is for carbon credits. He has said that at various points that he is for global government, and he has stated that he is for creating a technocratic form of government on Mars. I have actually shared these things. He hasn't deleted these tweets. This is stuff that and he hasn't retracted any of these statements. So now this guy has a heavy involvement in government. So we're blurring the lines here, where this isn't just about the marketplace. I mean, if this were just about market-based solutions, that's one thing, but we're now blurring it based on the fact that we now have government contracts involved in a heavy way. And this particularly extends to the PayPal mafia, right? Palantir, a whole new group of AI and Silicon Valley companies and companies tied to the PayPal mafia have formed kind of their own little union to try to get government,
including David Sachs. Excuse me for interrupting. Including David Sachs from the PayPal mafia to be the crypto czar.
Exactly, to be the crypto czar. So if these, if this were just existing in the marketplace, that would be one thing. But this blurs the line, and we've seen. I'm still waiting for somebody to show me where he said he was wrong, even on the political stuff. He said, well, he voted for Biden, but Biden got it's like it only got bad in the last 4 years, right? He's never stated why he was right about Obama. He was right about all these other things. It's just these people went bad, and they just went bad within the last 24 months. And this is not the case. So he finds himself on whatever the winning side is. And again, my issue with this is I'm for markets, free markets, and this is not a free market. And now we're walking into a situation. I'm telling you right now, I see this. I can see more damage being done from the standpoint of the surveillance state and technocracy in the first 100 days of Trump than in the last 4 years of Biden, because of this PayPal alliance. I can see people getting excited about digital IDs on the basis of it'll control illegal immigration. I can see. I can see, justifying a whole variety of additional surveillance for similar reasons. If we have more looting and everything else, it's like all of a sudden, well, we have Palantir here. I mean, Palantir has been, Peter Thiel's been working his way through and building all of this stuff up behind the scenes. He supported Trump in 2016. He's actually one of the main reasons Trump won in 2016. People don't realize that Palantir helped Trump in 2016. And there was a big gap between the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, and Palantir lent their AI and some of their help on voter turnout, and that's part of how he got elected. And so then it looked like Thiel took a back seat. Thiel didn't take a bad seat. Thiel, I will tell you how involved this gets. You may sit there and say, well, why at the Republican convention was Hulk Hogan there? And Peter Thiel bankrolled Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan had a defamation lawsuit against a company called Gawker. Gawker was an online site that would put out a lot of dirt. And Gawker had outed that Peter Thiel is gay. So Peter Thiel wanted revenge. And so what Peter Thiel did was he funded and bankrolled, there's a Netflix documentary on this, a lawsuit where Gawker had played a sex tape involving Hulk Hogan or Hulk Hogan's wife. I can't remember what the situation was. Peter Thiel bankrolled Hulk Hogan's legal fees. Hulk Hogan won, and it bankrupted Gawker. So we know what kind of person Peter Thiel is. But if you want to ask yourself how firmly the PayPal mafia and the technocracy is embedded in the Trump administration, then again, Thiel directly is responsible for Vance, down to the level of pushing and elevating and kind of rehabbing Hulk Hogan to push that narrative, to David Sachs, to Elon Musk, to all of it. So I think that we're going to, all of the stuff people were claiming that they didn't want under Biden, they're going to cheer on under Trump. And if you've been following me at all, and if you've read my book that I've been shouting for the last couple of years, the number one enemy we have isn't Republican or Democrat, and it isn't China versus the United States or Russia versus the United States. It's technocracy and global government versus free will. That is the ultimate battleground. And I'm telling you what I'm seeing just from these picks, from this legislation, and from everything that's going on. We're in for a bad 100 days. Now, my proposal to this is, again, I'm going to assume that maybe, I don't know that Trump is necessarily a technocrat. I think maybe Trump is going along with it, but not in any kind of strategic way. I think maybe he's bought into these guys are doing a good thing, and he just hasn't had alternate information. So I'm going to do my part to try to.
I think too, you have to take in consideration generational age. That Trump, how old he is. I don't think he's been an early adapter to a lot of new technology, so I think that's part of his why he was so anti-crypto in the beginning, and how Trump has switched. I think he just doesn't get it, or anti-blockchain. I think is probably a better way to put it. So I think he has to rely on the people that are around him who are open to new ideas and innovation. And he might have the wrong people surrounding himself yet again, just like we saw, from the China flu, whatever you want to call it.
Well, we know he has the wrong people because, you can research who those people are. They're all Bitcoin maxis. It's the only thing that he has surrounding him. He has the Winklevoss twins put up $40 million. And he has the guy that ran the Bitcoin conference, who actually seems to be a decent guy. Actually, he's not as the Winklevoss twins were involved in pushing Charlie Shrem to get thrown in prison. They actually worked with New York in this Bitcoin license, and so these guys bend with the wind. But Trump has never been exposed to this information. So I'm going to give it a go and try to put that together. And again, I think Roger's been trying to do the right thing. It didn't work its way into the presentation, and it just is part of the update. But I don't know if you guys saw, but Roger was on Tucker Carlson. Yeah. He had a great interview, 45-minute interview on Tucker Carlson, and Roger was the reason that I liked Roger was everything that was in that interview.
Agreed.
Roger's literally been saying the same things for 12, 13 years now. And and he talked about the hijacking of Bitcoin. He talked about the importance of privacy coins. I thought it was great. And I wish he would do more, frankly, because again, doing all these workshops and everything that I've done the last 2 years, if you're in crypto, you have a view of, all these battles have been hashed out and everything's already finalized. 99.99% of the population's never heard of any of this. And when they do hear about it, if you heard that, hey, Bitcoin, that thing that everybody, that they want to use taxpayer money to buy, hey, did you know that was hijacked by the deep state and traditional finance and by the same people that created all 3 US CBDC pilots with funding connections to Jeffrey Epstein? Is that something you might be interested in? And it turns out people are, because they've not heard. Oh, wow, that's what it is. I heard, all I heard was Michael Saylor say, there is no second best, and it's, whatever the propaganda is being pushed. People are alarmed. More people come up to, when I do these workshops, more people come up to me when I talk about what's happened to Bitcoin and the narrative shift. More people come up to me about that than they even do talking about CBDCs. So we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to push on that article, but it's taking me a long time just because I want to get the facts straight. But again, I think this is one of those, if you knew you had a Madoff situation coming or the Big Short coming in advance, if you could write the script, and is there a way to get people to watch the collapse happen beforehand? I mean, do you have to tell it as a story? It's like, hey, the story you're about to see is about to happen, right? I don't know if there's a way to actually get this information out here, but as we talked about on this other podcast earlier today, we really need to self-police here, because
yes,
what's being structured is a controlled demolition, but also a controlled demolition. If Tether collapses, then it's going to be really easy for Congress to say, see, these crypto people are loose cannons, and these people can't control their own behavior. We need laws and we need regulation, and only the top 4 banks can issue these stable coins now, and it'll be really easy for them to do it. And we're looking at the train wreck as it's approaching. So I think maybe we can warn people in advance.
There's 2 strategies that are at play here, I think. One is there are certainly those that want to see Tether's demise, and there are those, I would say, like a sailor, that doesn't want to see Tether go down and collapse because what it would do to the Bitcoin price and to the whole crypto market as a whole. So there's a lot of infighting that's happening behind the scenes, and 4D chess, if you will, that's being played. But we can't forget that Tether is like a profit. It's just printing money. Meaning it's printing money at a rate to be able to pay off a lot of government officials around the world. And that's going to be hard to overcome or to stop, I think. But I could be wrong. And then it also takes me back to the All In podcast, and one of the besties, is Chamath, who is best friends with who's the guy I just mentioned, David Sachs. And David Sachs, and Chamath recently said that 2025 is going to be the year of stable coins. And so when I heard him, a billionaire and tied into the whole Elon Musk and the technocracy, I can't speak, well, anyway, tied into all of that, I think for him to say that 2025 is going to be the year of stable coins and have David Sachs right there as the crypto czar, I thought, wow, I wasn't expecting that. So I kind of wonder how it's all going to play out.
Well, yeah, and there is the fact that, again, the government might be complicit in helping to bail out Tether just because Tether is there printing the money to buy the treasuries that no one else wants. So it's just, this is like a way of sustaining the Ponzi scheme, which again, from our perspective, this is bad, right? From the perspective of anybody who wants freedom, anybody who wants sound money, this is horrible. But you're right that they can print the Tether and that they can buy it off. I mean, they just made a huge investment in Rumble. So you want to talk about another thing that's likely to not be a free speech platform. They put $775 million into Rumble. And I think you're right. Look at FTX. Actually, so Sam Bankman-Fried gave money to both sides. In fact, Tom Emmer, who's this Republican who was he the minority whip or whatever, but he wrote the anti-CBDC bill, which drove me nuts because it was a useless bill that basically said, it took the existing law and the existing policy that's already on the books and just added a title to it and called it anti-CBDC. Anyway, this guy Emmer took a ton of money from Sam Bankman-Fried for himself, for a PAC, for a whole bunch of other things, never gave the money back. So this is one of the main Republican crypto guys that there were people. In fact, I'll tell you about it. Tom Massey endorsed Emmer to be the Speaker of the House instead of Michael Johnson. That's how bad this is.
That's how bad it is.
That's how bad it is. So you're right. So name me a politician that didn't get reelected on the basis of they took money from Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX. Name me one. Now, there may be some that lost that took money, but it's unrelated to, like, there were not political ads about Sam Bankman-Fried and money laundering and fraud and, basically what was going on here. And by the way, I think you can see parallels. FTX was an absolute scam. Ponzi scheme. This guy was printing tokens and all this other stuff and leverage and commingling funds and doing all this other stuff. But what was going on behind the scenes? He was meeting with the Federal Reserve. He was meeting with the SEC. He was meeting with lawmakers. They were looking to make SBF the guy to draft the legislation. And so they're painting him out to be the guy that's going to define the rules of the road to make sure that crypto's safe because he's this successful guy out there. Well, if you don't know what's going on with Tether and you're reading the Wall Street Journal article that says, hey, Tether made more money in the first half of this year than BlackRock, and now you see that the Commerce Secretary is the lead investor, you're thinking to yourself, oh, this must be an up and up company. Because Trump would never pick a cabinet member that led an investment in an absolute Ponzi scheme. And then once that's done, if it's not publicly known before all of this happens, then they're going to want to cover it up because they look like complete morons for having allowed it. So I think you're right. You're right that this again, I think this is going to get catastrophically bad, which is why if you're interested in sound money and you don't like CBDCs, we could end up getting a backdoor CBDC, which is basically Tether becoming the CBDC because the government had people involved with Tether in the administration that wanted to cover up their bad investments and their bad behavior. And so we'll get punished. We will have self-custody crypto banned. They'll go after privacy crypto because of what I'm describing right now. Now, it's not implausible. In fact, what we just described is probably the base case. The difference is, can we get ahead of it? Can we actually tell this story beforehand? And by the way, the Sam Bankman-Fried thing got so bad that Michael Lewis, who wrote the book, The Big Short, that turned into that movie, and he's written several other books that were great.
That was a great movie, great book. Yes.
Great book. A lot of his stuff was great. And then he wrote a complete fluff piece about Sam Bankman-Fried and went on 60 Minutes. Basically selling this guy. So pick your favorite author. It would be like, who's another author that exposes things. Take whatever. Take whoever the recent one. I don't even know who the recent one is that exposes this, and then having them do a 180, and they'll become the Tether advocate.
Trump has got a hot potato with the economy. I think there's a lot that he's been that he will inherit. And part of it is his own doing, too, from his presidency. And I'm speaking of the debt. So this hot potato could rear its ugly head. And that's, again, part of the 4D chess. I think if there are members of the deep state that want to see Trump fail, they're going to use that against him. And I don't know where stable coins are going to play in the role into that. You make an excellent point that maybe this is another way they bring about, CBDCs. And kind of to go back one other notch, I think Elon Musk was probably taking very good notes during the Facebook Libra debacle. And how Facebook wanted Libra to become a stable coin and be integrated in Facebook. So he figured he learned very quickly what won't work and won't get through Congress and how to get that through Congress eventually. Or he just might do it kind of more rogue and just force it.
Yep. Well, that's exactly right. So that brings me to the next point. So this whole point was I wanted, in this podcast, I wanted to go through freedom versus technocracy, but also give an update on what I'm doing for the year. So that everybody, because travel starts in 12 days and then I'm like gone most of the time. So it's crazy. But I want to walk through. Speaking of stable coins, I want to talk a little bit about my project Karma, and so
exciting.
There isn't much there. There's a one-page website, so this is it right now. But let me explain how I got to this. So I've been living on crypto since 2019, and I've been trying to onboard other people. In fact, I ran for president to warn people about CBDCs, but again, the answer to this isn't going to be at the ballot box because government money doesn't work. It's actually never worked in human history. Every fiat currency has failed, and certainly we're doing everything wrong that you can do with a fiat currency. There's nothing exceptional about the way the United States is treating the dollar. There are 7 reasons that fiat currencies fail. And usually a currency will fail because of 2 or 3 of them, We have all 7 of them. We have debt, economic mismanagement, competition. You go through the list, and
debasement, electronic debasement,
overextension of the military, political, like, whatever. We have it. And but living on crypto and then doing these workshops and trying to onboard to crypto, I talked to a lot of merchants, and I've tried to get merchants to adopt crypto. Others have tried, right? There are websites that you can go to, and typically what's happened is somebody's really excited about one particular crypto, and they go talk to a small business owner, and the small business owner says, "Oh, sure, I'll try this." They download a wallet, they get a little pin on a map, and then nobody ever uses it again. That's the more often than not what the case is. But when I talk to merchants, what they tell me is, yes, I understand that the dollar is losing value. In fact, if you're a small business owner, it's almost hard to stay in business. The Brownstone Institute actually did a study. Just since COVID, the dollar's lost between 25 and 40% of its purchasing power, just since 2020. So business owners want alternative currency. In fact, I have a list of merchants that want what I'm about to talk about, this gold-backed stablecoin. The problem is they can't understand and don't want to deal with the price volatility of crypto. And, and I'll argue with people in crypto. It's like, well, blah, 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 this, that, the other thing, but this is backed up by math. It doesn't matter. They don't care if it's backed up by math. If they have 7% margins and the volatility is that it could go down 40% a month. They literally are unable to pay rent. They're unable to pay vendors, and they're unable to pay for labor. So they're not going to make a principled or theoretical bet on whether or not people have not adopted this for peer-to-peer commerce in 16 years, to the point where in the US, at the last survey that I saw, we'll probably do for a new one, only 0.5% of Americans in the last period used cryptocurrency to buy something, to actually make a transaction, which is down from, I think it peaked at like 2%. So people are not using these things. So we know merchants want to be able to take, and it's not because they don't want digital currency. Our currency is already digital. Overwhelmingly, people use digital. There's not like when I started my first e-commerce company in 1995, I actually had to put together print brochures to actually sell people on the idea that people would be willing to put their credit card information into a web form, right? That people were not like that was a barrier. This is not a barrier now. Everything, payroll, direct deposit, everything that you do is already digital. The Federal Reserve runs on an Oracle database. So it's not like we're not asking people to make a big behavioral shift. So it is the volatility of the price, and it's the fact that there's not enough buying power. So if somebody comes and they say, "Oh, I've got this cryptocurrency and it's got a $200 million market cap globally." Well, okay. Well, so if I have a small business, then if you look at a 25-mile radius around my location, maybe 5 people have this cryptocurrency, right? It's not enough to move the needle. So people do like precious metals. But the interesting thing is, and I'm an advisor to this group, Citizens for Sound Money, and there's this whole big movement to make gold and silver legal tender at the state level. And arguably it's in the Constitution that it is something that, federally, silver and gold should be used as money. That's gone away, and the Constitution's also been suspended. But here's the problem: even the government screws up gold and silver as money. So it's not as if, we were on the gold standard until Nixon in 71, 72. And France decided, hey, they had their, Federal Reserve, they had their little certificates that were redeemable for gold. And so they called it in. They said, hey, we want our gold. And our Secretary of the Treasury basically said, well, that's your problem. And then Nixon abandoned the gold standard. So you can't, all of a sudden, if you have states issuing legal tender, or even the idea that we go back on the gold standard, there's no reason for us to believe that will work. The most recent absurd thing is like Zimbabwe said they're going to go on the gold standard. And you've probably seen these $50 trillion Zimbabwe notes. Do we believe that the ethics of government have changed, and that now all of a sudden, because the politicians say they're going to make it redeemable for gold, that they're going to make it redeemable for gold? No. Of course not. So then we're back down to
going to be audited. Of course
Or
not.
yeah, or that's going to be audited. We still can't get a full audit on Fort Knox. That was a whole other thing. There were politicians in the 70s that went to Fort Knox and they came back and they said, we didn't see the gold there. And there, we still don't have these audits. I mean, the funniest thing would be this Loomis wants to give some of our gold reserves up for Bitcoin. And the funny thing would be to find out we don't even have the gold to exchange for Bitcoin. But but so my idea is very simple, and I want to be very clear when I say this. I'm not a maxi even for my own coin. I don't believe in maximalism at all as a concept. I believe in the free markets, and that we need to have multiple coins, and that there should always be competition and always be innovation. Like the idea, what are the odds that we come up with the one thing that is eternally the best thing for all time? I mean, I find that to be kind of a limited and depressing thought that, well, this is it. We've peaked. This is the form of money to rule them all. However, knowing what the problems are, knowing that we need to we need to have something to use in opposition to CBDC, for which we have nothing right now, and Bitcoin is absolutely not it. It cannot be based on the transaction fees and the block size. It could have been, but it is not. So if the shit hits the fan tomorrow and everybody wanted to use Bitcoin, they couldn't. We would go back to the same problems that we had in 2017. It would take 10 days to complete a transaction. It would cost $50, $100 in fees. None of that has been fixed. So my idea is, okay, well, let's have a gold-backed cryptocurrency, but not controlled by the state. So we separate money and state. We have all of the benefits of gold and all of the 5,000 years of history as a store of value, and everybody agrees that gold is a good store of value. But it's not portable. You can't do e-commerce transactions or anything like that. And all of these cryptocurrencies, there are some gold coins that are on Ethereum, but these are transparent blockchains. And so you don't want people to be able to see how much you have, or to have the government be able to intervene, because then you're going to run into the same problems you have with Bitcoin. All of a sudden, if I can say, I am's Bitcoin or gold coin can be flagged as different than Aaron's and put on a blacklist or a whitelist, then that's no longer fungible. So what we want is the privacy features of a Monero, and we want low fees, and we want we want fast transaction times, but we want something backed by gold, redeemable for gold, but that is separate from state, where the whole point of this enterprise is, in no way, shape, or form is the issuance or creation of the currency tied to government spending or tied to debt, because debt ruins, historically, literally every currency in human history. So this is the idea behind Karma, which is we do just that. We have a network of decentralized vaults in different countries. And by the way, there's still some risk to this. I mean, there's risk of, so it's not going to be all gold in one vault in one country. It's going to be spread apart. There's going to be auditing of the gold, and and I'm still playing around with some of the aspects of this. I may be able to also get insurance as well. So there are ways of doing this, but the gold itself will be audited regularly, and will use what Zano calls an auditable wallet. So you will actually be able to see. So whereas the tokens that are issued, you won't be able to see the individual transactions, but the actual supply of gold as it relates to the gold that's being held in the decentralized vaults, that will be auditable and publicly available to see, and you will be able to redeem the tokens for physical gold. Now, you'll only be able to do this one day out of the month, and this factors into the business model of the cost, because the gold is vaulted, and there are costs in actually shipping the gold to somebody and going through that entire process. And in fact, if you're dealing with the tokens are private. If you actually want to redeem for physical gold, there is a KYC process for that. So so the interesting thing about it is this is designed in a way where everything that I'm talking about is legal, at least for now. I mean, as you said, I think, there are people that will not like.
Jurisdictionally, it might be legal where,
it's legal everywhere. There's nothing illegal about what I described. There's absolutely nothing illegal about issuing a token that's backed by gold. And to the extent that if you're trying to redeem for the physical gold, you actually have to go through KYC, then that actually doesn't. Yeah, then you're not even running into those issues. and
Okay.
the actual issuance of it and everything else. And by the way, the design of this, so much of what's been problematic, I think, for the privacy community is it's taken this angle of, well, yeah, let's open up the marketplace for illegal drugs. That my
Right.
purpose is this is for small merchants all over the world that have that are getting crushed by inflation everywhere, and so literally can't use fiat currency, and where crypto is not an alternative. And the way that the merchants will actually get this, so when you use a point of sale system like a Now Payments, you can, as the merchant, select multiple cryptocurrencies, but you only get paid in one. So in other words, they have kind of a swapping service behind the scenes. So you may take Monero, you may take Litecoin, you may take Bitcoin Cash, but the merchant only gets paid in one coin. So the distribution for this is actually, the way we get this into circulation is through the swap function, because the merchants actually want Karma. I mean, again, I can tell you, there's a list of probably at this point $50 million a year and growing in annual revenue of retailers that absolutely want this, because this solves their problem. And so then you build a network of merchants, and then they start paying each other. So there's an actual plan and distribution for this. So I wanted to mention this just because this is, I think, again, not a maximalist for this, but this solves, I believe, the problem of how do we use, what is an alternative currency that we use for merchants, for actual commerce, as opposed to CBDCs. And so my goal is to launch this at Porkfest this year.
Oh, wow.
Porkfest is in June.
I got to make a trip to Porkfest then.
Well, I'm hoping, by the way, Porkfest is big. We may do this like Moneratopia inside of Porkfest, where we have a whole big tent for the entire week, and it's tied in with the Monero conference in Prague. And then my hope is Ross Ulbricht is there, and Roger is there, and Ian Freeman is there, because what a lot of you might not know, if you're not familiar with the Free State Project, like so much of the original adoption and enthusiasm for cryptocurrency started as a result of the Free State Project and some of the events that we have. Porkfest, which is the Porcupine Freedom Festival, it's held at a campground in June. It's a week-long event that now as many as 3,000 people show up for an entire week. And people don't use fiat currency. There's an entire marketplace and an economy and Agora Alley, and so people are doing trade, and you're listening to talks, and there's now a whole kids section and everything else. But this is where early people learned about Bitcoin. I first saw Roger Ver talk about Bitcoin. I learned about Bitcoin in 2012 from him at an event called Liberty Forum. And then I was at a Porkfest, and I met, I think, Eric Voorhees in 2012. I met Vitalik before he started Ethereum at Porkfest. And so my vision for this is to we had the right vision in 2012. In 2012, it was completely electric. It's like, yes, we're going to use cryptocurrency, and this is how we're going to stop central banks and all of the wars and all of the inflation and all of the poverty that's created because of this state-run money. We're done with that. This is the original vision. Well, it got hijacked. We've gone through this, but we now know we've got, if not, this isn't necessarily even the end-all solution either. We've got a better way. We've got something else to try. Let's try privacy coins. Let's try privacy-backed stable coins. And let's go back to the roots. And I will tell you, people are excited about this. Roger was excited about the idea. I think that if everything goes right. So that's when I want to launch it by. I'm going to be doing testing before that, and I'm not going to go into all the details. The hardest part of it is not technical. The hardest part of it is actually legal. And to do this in a way where, you put in place a lot of safeguards and kind of can protect. It's not that they're not going to go after it, but you can put enough safeguards in. You can stay enough steps ahead to give yourself a little bit of runway. So I'm excited about that. And if anybody knows me, I'm not motivated by, I don't want a Lambo. I've been through this before. I've had a big house. I bought one of the first Teslas. My lifestyle is not going to change at all because of, I don't do that anymore, by the way. But this to me is a platform for spreading voluntarism. And so what I would do with Karma is actually invest in a open source point of sale system and an open source marketplace. So imagine Silk Road, but instead of Silk Road for drugs, it's Silk Road for organic vegetables. It's Silk Road for it's Silk Road for raw milk. It's Silk Road for alternative health products that that are legal, but yet people get debanked for it. So the stuff that Joseph Mercola sells, the stuff that Health Ranger sells, like in fact, my vision for this is what we really need to do is focus on having a marketplace that addresses Maslow's base hierarchy of needs, because what's going to happen when they go to push CBDCs, the first thing everybody's going to say is, well, how am I going to be able to survive with these alternate currencies? So what we need to be building right now first is a network of merchants and the tools that make it so that people can survive on these things, so that when they go to ratchet up that tyranny, which they always do with problem, reaction, solution. They always do in an emergency. They always do in a state of fear. At that point of fear, usually you're only presented with one option. Well, if we do this right, we can present them with another option, and then they can say, "Oh, hey, yeah, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this full slave thing." So, anyway, that's what's going on with that. So more to come on that. You can go to Karma.com. There's an email list, and so again, I see that as a big platform. Also, throughout the year, I was going to do a whole recap. I didn't even know I did well over 50 interviews last year.
Yes,
and by the end, so I ended up on Alex Jones at the end of the year. Ended up on Dr. Drew. The Alex Jones thing.
Congrats, Aaron, for that.
Thanks. And the Alex Jones thing got 8 million views. And I was stunned by that. I'll just play a real short clip from that. Or will I? Let me see if this is
a blockchain called Zano, Z-A-N-O, which is an incredible technology that has really been 10 years in the making with proven cryptography behind it. And so the way to be successful at this is to out-innovate. And we know what we're facing with these central banks. The whole point of what's going on with CBDCs is a movement towards a single global digital currency and a complete surveillance state where inevitably all of our transactions are monitored and our behavior is tied to a social credit score, and whether or not we have access to money relates to whether or not we comply with government mandates. And so the way you defeat surveillance is with privacy, which is why I think projects like Zano, Monero, and the stablecoin that I'm working on are ways out, legitimate ways out where people can opt out of the system.
So anyway, that was the cap for that, and I'm gonna share kind of my plans for Daylight, which is my 501c3 that my wife and I work on together to do all these workshops and everything. We're just relaunching the site. We're in the middle of, let me see if I can pop this up. We're in the middle of changing out the site and the branding, but I can show you that. So, basically, so for this year, it's events. And as I said at the very beginning, I mean, now we have conferences I'm going to be in Mexico a couple times and a lot of stuff overseas, even in Europe. It's not, we get so focused on the United States, but I really got my eyes opened this year about, just how much opportunity there is elsewhere. In fact, and by the way, I will say this stablecoin that I'm starting is not going to be based in the United States. I would never, as much as we talk about like the H-1B visa things and everything else, I will tell you my opinion on this is I started my first company when I was 19. I actually put out a post on this. The biggest problem that we have is there are employment laws that are triggered at like 1, 5, 10, 15 or whatever employees. They're all bullshit. I should be able to hire whoever I want voluntarily. And it's not because I'm trying to do slave labor. The thing that kicked it off for me was when I was like 22 or 23 years old, and we got to the point where we had, I can't remember what it was, 100 employees. And all of a sudden we had to hire HR consulting firms to come in and run preemptive sexual harassment sensitivity training programs for all of the employees. And then like people are filling out the paperwork. We're running an e-commerce business. Like this has nothing to do with our business. And now all of a sudden, and by the way, this actually happened. I vowed to whatever company I start, never have an HR department, because it turns out the only person that I ever had a sexual harassment issue with was the person that I hired to be my HR person, right? Like, you couldn't make this stuff up. So it was like, it's just, and then I started studying, all right, well, people that go into HR, what is their curriculum like? And then Cornell is like the top school for this. And then you look at their curriculum, and they're basically teaching people how to come in and form unions and basically disrupt companies. Like, it has nothing. It's almost, they're almost a laughing stock at the executive management team level. It's like this thing that everybody knows they have to have. Well, why do we put up with this? They're not helping employees. They're not helping anybody. But anyway, that's my rant on that. But I would never start a company again in the United States. I want to be able to do whatever I'm working on. And the Labor Department adds no value in the economy. But in any event, so I'm doing these other events.
It's funny you say that, because I just said that. I think it was either this past Monday or the Monday before last, when I was on Litecoin Lisa's show, and I said the same thing. The last thing I would do is probably, or he was on World Blockchain Roundtable, is start another company up in the U.S. I just wouldn't do it. It's Another quick comment. Tracy's interview that she did here on InfoWars, where Roger's mouth is taped up. That was just brilliant. That was brilliant, because he's censored. He's unable to talk. I was glad that he came out and actually spoke there in Tucker Carlson's interview. That was brilliant. And kudos and shout out to Tracy. She's done an outstanding job presenting how Roger Ver has been wronged by the government, that he left. He rounds.
She's done a number. She also did a great one. The first one was Charlie Kirk, which was the first time he did the thing with the tape, and then also again on Alex Jones. So I thought it was phenomenal.
And what's the gentleman's name? Oh, I'm trying to blank. The HHR.
Robert Barnes. Mike Adams.
Mike Adams. Oh, I like Mike Adams a lot. Mike Adams, by the way, is incredible. Mike has had me on Decentralized TV, and then he invited me on the Alex Jones show when he was the co-host, and I was so excited, because the opportunity to be on Alex Jones show without having to be on with Alex Jones was like that. but Mike really gets it. So in addition, if you followed his stuff, his Health Ranger stuff, but I have for years.
What he's building he's building his own self-custody AI. So based on all of the health data that he's been building all over the years, all of the stuff that, gets suppressed through these big tech engines, he's basically putting together a model. It's going to come out in May. I was actually just chatting with him about it this morning, because this NVIDIA thing, they're releasing this $3,000 supercomputer that's like this big, and you're going to be able to basically do everything on your own, right? And without even being connected to the internet. And so I'm so excited about that. So I encourage everybody, check out Decentralized TV, check out Health Ranger, check out Brighteon. I think Brighteon, I was so excited about every interaction that I've had with him. So I'm thrilled about that. So there's, my goal, and I guess I'll go back to this presentation this year, is, so for this podcast, well, we had a lot of great guests last year. And I mean, it was just, I kind of started this obviously randomly. There's it's just me running it operationally, which is why we always seem to have audio problems at the beginning. Although I did upgrade the camera. I got a completely new camera and light setup after I was on Alex Jones, and I had a green screen, and I basically had this like blue outline. And so Mike called me Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I'm like, all right, it's time to get serious. But this year, I want to try to keep to doing this weekly. I like doing these live, but because of the travel, they're not necessarily all going to be able to be live. But I want to focus on these 4 areas. So when you look at these are not intended to be short podcasts, but I'm not interested in. There are a lot of people now that are focused on politics and how are we going to influence all this. I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about 4 areas. I want to talk about technocracy, and I'm going to tell you some of the guests that I want to have on. this year. Hopefully I'll have on Patrick Wood. I'm chatting
that'd
with
be
him. Literally, he's written the book on technocracy. He's been following the Trilateral Commission for 40 years. Derek Brose, Whitney Webb, and David Icke.
Webb would be phenomenal. David Icke.
It'll be controversial, but David Icke, I will tell you, I've read a lot of David Icke's stuff. He's the people that don't like him, I've noticed they've never read any of his stuff. But he's been very interested on what he's been saying about technocracy. I'd love to have him on. I want to talk about network states, which if you caught my interview with Sterling Lujan last year, Sterling's great. I'm going to see him again in a couple of weeks. He's really been focused on this area of network states, which is people that are basically getting together and forming communities and then going out and buying sovereignty. And he's working on some really interesting things. He's actually got a think tank to help people that are starting network states to kind of come up with best practices for governance. And so, because if you think about it, throughout history, governments have usually just been there like by force, right? It's like this governance system exists because somebody, has all the weapons and owns all the land. Recently, we've been experimenting with more things, but nobody's really done like a comparative, well, what works and what doesn't work from a scientific perspective, or even thinking about that from first principles from the get-go. So I'm going to have him on. He's working on it. Huh?
It's a fascinating topic, and it's a fascinating concept, and I could see it in its fruition. I kind of think of it. I look at the network states concept as if it were, let's say, the 1750s in this country, if you will.
Yep. Exactly. I mean, so it's really exciting to me. And it's much better than talking about these rigged things that we've got going on here. I'm going to have Amir Taki on, hopefully. I don't know if you know him. He's an incredible guy, one of the first Bitcoin developers who left, and then he went and fought ISIS, but not as part of the government of the UK, and then he got under house arrest. But he's now creating something called DarkFi.
It's an amazing story. Yeah.
I'm going to talk about private sound money. So I'm going to continue to. So I want to bring on, for instance, I'm going to bring on the Zeno guys, the founders, and I want to explain to people more about why I'm using it, but also how it works as it relates to my stablecoin, but just so that people can understand it more. And I'm not going to limit it to just Zeno. I'm also going to bring on the Cake Wallet people and Monero and everything else. But I want to do a deeper dive, and then, but also take a step back because, it's like everything else. I'm new to the privacy crypto community, but you find that these
concepts are the same.
Well, there's a lot of, but it always turns into infighting. So all of a sudden, people are arguing over this really small thing, and then the whole world doesn't know anything about any of it. And so I'm hoping we can kind of like for instance, there was a interview on Monerotopia, and people are like, well, what's the point of tokens, right? I mean, and so and most people hold that view because of the way the crypto community is implemented tokens, which is meme coins and NFTs. But the reality is, the technocrats are tokenizing every asset that you own, and stocks, bonds, real estate, even your own personal movement is tracked and tokenized. And so we need parallel systems to that. And so I'm going to go into more detail on that. And then I'm going to continue to interview political prisoners. Hopefully, they'll be free. Hopefully, I'm not going to interview Roger, now, but hopefully I'll interview him after he's out. And I'd love to interview Ross, Ian, Julian. So I'm going to try to stick to the one per week, but these are the basic categories. So I'm not going to get, I want it to be focused in this area.
I would like to see, someone else I would like you to add to your list is I'd like to have him on again. And I'm drawing a blank. He talked about he was talking about an individual who was wronged, kind of kidnapped by the FBI, thrown in a van, threatened during the whole ETH game. What's his name?
Nerioff, Steve Nerioff.
I would like to hear his kind of thoughts on network states, for example, and technocracy. I'm sure he would have a lot to say in that arena as well.
Yeah, I'd love to bring him back on, and I'd like to bring all the guests that I had last year back on again. I mean, because they're all, Ray Youssef is another one who's working on No Ones, which is basically helping onboard the global South with a cryptocurrency exchange, and he's now gone big into Monero, and I had a great talk with it. So and he's right there on network states because he's implementing something called CivKit, Civilization Kit. So yeah, no. So these are all the kind of people that I want to continue to do, because I think this is going to be valuable content. And again, maybe I'm wrong, but most of the people that I know are falling for it again. They're buying into this. And by the way, if everybody buys into this and what it turns out they end up supporting is technocracy, then enough of us need to start branching off and working on plan B. And I'd love to be wrong.
States is plan B.
What?
Network states just might be plan B.
I think networks, in my opinion, network states are the best thing we've got going. I love it. And so anyway, that's where we're going to be going on that. So my goals for this year for Daylight are, I'm also working on a new book, which I'm expanding on the old book, but also going into more detail. Basically, showing people that what people are concerned about in terms of social credit systems and CBDCs, we already have today. And people are just not aware of it. And I wasn't even aware of it until I spent all this time focused on it. I started out, they're going to build CBDCs and here's the trajectory. And then I'm like, well, what exactly is a CBDC? And then I'm like, well, all right, how does our existing system work? And then it's, light bulb. We already have digital, programmable, trackable money. So we already have a CBDC. There's a ninth level of hell that you can go to with CBDCs and surveillance tech, and that's where they're going. And so I kind of have this tyranny index, and we need to have a freedom index, and we need to start, we're not going to get everybody using. And so a lot of this book is going to be laying out in detail how it's already bad and explaining it in ways that are undeniable by the time you're done reading it. But then in the solutions section, again, talking about how we can start taking gradual steps. I'm not stopping doing the workshops, but what I realized was that, I was onboarding people and people were downloading wallets and everything else, and even how I live on crypto it's a small percentage that's peer-to-peer, and it's only in New Hampshire, or actually at Porkfest or at some of these conferences that I go to have their own marketplaces. But if I'm traveling, most places I've got to use a gift card, or I've got to use a debit card that I offload the thing to. But that's okay. That's an interim step. But as long as you know that you're going down a continuum, right? So, as long as you're moving, if people think that just using debit cards is now you're living on crypto and that's the end of it, well, that's a problem. They can shut off gift cards like that, right? I mean, so this is something that I want to be more methodical. And as I mentioned, so Porkfest for me, the idea is by Porkfest, I want to have point of sale system done, wallet integrated, so that, and then this gold backed stablecoin. So that when we do these workshops, at the end of the workshop, I want somebody who's newly onboarded to crypto to be able to make a purchase directly from a merchant who's been onboarded to crypto, because the amount of effort that it takes to go through and get somebody to do one actual real transaction, it's unbelievable how long that takes. And so I want to be able to have this as a simplified process as part of the workshop. And then from there, and my goal is by fall, I'm thinking I might want to have a workshop at Bretton Woods here in New Hampshire, just for the symbolism of it all. But then record
to say Bretton Woods in fall. I didn't know about that. No, okay.
But then the goal is to make this an online course. And so, look, you guys have probably seen a lot of this. There are a lot of people that charge $2,000 for seminars. There's a whole there's a whole thing about this. There's a whole how to become an influencer and do all this. This is not what I'm doing. The entire purpose of the workshops is to get direct human feedback that can be incorporated. And I'm actually going to have developers there from Zano, from Cake Wallet, and from some of the other solution providers, because they will learn more in a 4-hour workshop from watching people try to use their product than they probably have from inception to where they are. I've already seen this happen. And then the end goal is to make this an online course so that we can scale and onboard millions of people. Because this is the end goal. So these workshops break even. Sometimes they don't even break even. In fact, I run this through a nonprofit. I'm probably going to raise a little bit of money for it at some point. There are no salaries, there's no rent. It's just literally going to fund
Right.
the program costs, some of the travel, and then getting the online course ready. This is how I think we can get to the point.
Yeah, I think online courses is a great way to go. By the way, Aaron, what was the average age for the seminars you have done so far? What do you think the average age for the attendee?
I would say the average age is probably 60.
I was going to say, yeah, and
maybe
that's a good market that is, I shouldn't call it market. It's a generation that needs this information, and needs that more close one-on-one teaching moment. So that would make sense.
Well, the challenge is this: older people understand privacy but struggle more with the technology. The younger people understand technology and don't value privacy, and so this is the big challenge that we have. But again, if we can make the tools easy enough, people want to use it. The demand is there, and this is the important thing that I think I bring, and why I'm so glad I've done all of these talks and workshops, is that when I go to a crypto conference like Moneratopia, where everybody's been just talking to people in the crypto space, I'm like, guys, whatever it is you think you're arguing, you are like light years away from what's actually going on. And by the way, the people that show up for my workshops are not average people. These are people that are engaged enough to want to buy a book and spend 4 hours, typically on a Saturday, listening to a talk about CBDCs, right? So this is definitely and these people have never heard of Satoshi Nakamoto. They've never heard that you could use Bitcoin as a currency, and it's just not what people think it is. They're not in these minutiae arguments over, oh, well, if it's only if it has some proof of stake, nobody cares. And by the way, even to the point about stablecoins, because a lot of people will say, well, this stablecoin sucks because you do have to trust some third party. And I'm like, people are using Tether. People use Tether. People don't use the thing that you're talking about based on the thing that you think is important. They don't care about the thing that you think is important. This is why we don't have merchant adoption. So, everything is about,
and legal issues and taxation is another reason we don't have merchant adoption, I would argue.
I mean, it is one. It is one other part, but it doesn't explain lack of.
But it has a lot to do with the price, fluctuation, and or the concerns of regulation overshadowing and digging into their business. The small mom
and by the way, some of this, when I mentioned the legality, some of this is, depending on how you structure it. If gold is legal tender, then you actually get out of some of these taxation issues as well, which is part of the nuance. I'm not just focusing on the US, but there is a situation where if I had a network of vaults and let's say one of them was in Utah, then if somebody redeemed there, then all of a sudden they don't have tax cut. They don't have any capital gains issues. Mm-hmm. And so there are a lot of this but all of this is going to change, and it's going to be a constant battle. But for me, minimum viable product is an easy to use wallet, which I like Cake. I'm glad I started working with Cake. Cake is going to have Zeno in it. I believe they'll also have Karma in it. I mean, I haven't finalized that, but there's receptivity there, and it'll be easy to add. Once they add Zeno, then technically it's just another token. So that's part of a minimum viable product. A point of sale system that's also multi-asset. So this right now looks like Now Payments is going to be able to do this. So we will have a easy to use wallet, easy to use point of sale system. And then this is optional, but I do think this idea of, and by the way, I would only work on this if I got Karma funded and actually had some, I can fund things out of Karma, right? Like there's an actual vehicle to do this, but like I said, build a marketplace it's not where the emphasis isn't on drugs. The emphasis is on build Maslow's hierarchy of needs and building something out so that, we've got an arc when they do another false flag and they try to ratchet up with the PayPal mafia and X payments and everything else. And then obviously
that's an opportunity for somebody who wants to, kind of diversify their income stream, shall we say, or obtain new clients for whatever product that they're selling, and to be able to obtain maybe a gold back, token or some other token. I think that's an issue that has been lacking and has dropped off of the face of the earth, of a marketplace for tokens, or a marketplace for products and services that accept some form of crypto. It really has fallen off of the face of the earth, to be honest with you. Or maybe I'm looking at from the blinders of the U.S. because I haven't traveled outside of the U.S. except for Mexico recently. So,
well, yeah. So hey, maybe we can recruit Ross.
Yeah.
No, I'm just, I don't think he's.
Yeah.
But
I know, just joking.
But I think that there's a way to do it that's at least again. Don't start out with the marketplace being about like this dark market stuff. Start out with there's nothing illegal about a marketplace. It's all about positioning. And so again, this is kind of overview of what I'm up to. If you want to help, I don't know why this is point of sale, but on the Roger front, if you want to help with Roger, sign the open letter at freerogernow.org. If you know anyone that kind of a high profile person or somebody that might be willing to write a pardon letter, I already have a template. Reach out to me directly. And then if you just help by sharing content. So whatever the interviews are, Tracy's interviews, Robert Barnes's interviews, who knows, maybe Roger will do another interview.
Go back and share them again, repost them again, even if you haven't, in 30 days or something.
Yeah, share them again and look back at the Free Roger Now site. Again, there's hopefully there's going to be a lot of momentum for this leading up to it. I'm mixed. I'm on the one hand, I'm horrified because it looks like we're getting technocracy. On the other hand, I feel like it's not because of ill intention. But on the other hand, we don't have a lot of time. So how do we get the truth in a way and also help Roger, which I think is all one thing. At least this is me talking personally. This is not the Free Roger campaign. This is me talking from a very personal level as someone who's like put his life on hold to just warn people about CBDCs. Like the first 100 days of Trump's administration could be worse than everything that we've been fighting so far. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm reading the bills. So, I mean, unless I have not seen alternate bills proposed or alternate legislation. I've seen no legislation drafted by any Republicans that makes me optimistic about self-custody, that makes me optimistic about privacy, and that makes me optimistic about peer-to-peer digital cash. Nothing. I haven't seen anything. And I look. So, but I certainly could always be wrong. On Daylight, if you know of any speaking events, let me know that are good. Interviews. Look, my goal is I would love to do this thing at Porkfest, get the minimum viable product. I'd love to go on Joe Rogan at some point. I wouldn't want to go on Joe Rogan now, but if we had a scalable online solution where it's like, I can talk to Joe Rogan about, hey, yeah, here's what CBDCs are. Oh yeah, this is what all this other stuff is. What's the solution? This is the solution. Millions of people can go right now. Sign up, download a wallet, sign up. Download as a merchant, set this up on your site. You can be instantly within like 15 minutes accepting and using alternative currencies. That's the point that we've got to get to. That's where I want to get to with this. And of course, I'll continue to do interviews that I hope are helpful. And I appreciate all of the suggestions. And I see another one here, Hakeem Anwar, about Linux-based devices that can't be tracked. So all of this. And so, yeah, please shoot me, DM me ideas of other people that you would like to see, and just know that I'm interested in solutions and also uncovering kind of deeper truths, and that's kind of where we're going with that. And then on the Karma side, go to karma.org, sign up for the list if you want, and then like I said, there may be some hiring opportunities there in a variety of areas, some technical, but a lot in terms of actually reaching out to merchants and trying to onboard people. That will happen once this thing is built. So if you reach out to me on that now, understand like I'm not hiring somebody today. I haven't, the processes for this is going to be get the initial structure done and funding, work out the kinks of the actual product, and then we'll ramp up. But I want to start talking to people now, because I will say this is true of everything that I work on, and I have come to this conclusion from trial by fire. I only want to work with people that are ideologically aligned. So, absolutely. I mean, unless you're interested in sound money and promoting voluntary interaction, unless you like really like not a, no, don't bullshit a resume. Like, unless this is really something you're passionate about, all of this is driven by passion. And if people are passionate, that's what's going to make it work. But with that said, it's hard to find people. So I'm casting a net now. So if you want to, sign up for the email list or whatever, we'll put your name in. I'd like to start a dialogue and start getting to know people now, so that it's kind of, when the time is right, we can pull the trigger and not be in a situation where it's like, oh, we've just hired somebody from the CIA, or we've just hired somebody that's we've just hired somebody from Black Lives Matter, or somebody from George Soros, and now they're tanking the organization. Yeah. So. Yeah. So that's all I've got, but happy to continue to chat and see if anybody has any questions. I see a lot of comments here about Elon and occult symbolism. I could go in depth about.
Oh boy!
Look, I was going through a thing the other day, looking at this why Greenland and why everything else, and it's like, this is out of the Club of Rome handbook. Actually, this is the globe is going to be divided up into 10 regions, and the region, so the United States, Canada, Greenland is one of the 10 regions. And if you go even further into this, you want to get more whack job, you get into biblical prophecies and the end days, and there are 10 leaders. And I haven't done the research to cross-reference if those 10 leaders map to these 10 zones or anything else, but there's a lot of weird stuff going on in that regard. So on the occult side, Elon's grandfather was the head of the Technocratic Party in Canada, and there's a whole bunch, and there are a lot of rabbit holes you can go down, and some of them may be fake. And again, my whole issue with this is we really don't want technocracy. From my perspective, it's just my personal opinion. When my wife and I started Daylight, the purpose of Daylight, we actually started talking about this in 2019. So we started talking about this before COVID, and it had nothing to do with CBDCs. It had nothing to do with cryptocurrency. I spent a lot of time doing meditation and going in directions that were completely not where I had been my entire life up to that point. And so it was really about kind of exploring consciousness and expanding consciousness. And so it actually put together this idea of, after having been involved in the liberty movement for a long time and looked at, these organizations tend to go in a certain way. And it is an interesting question with a lot of these things. Like, do they start out as like deep state projects, or do they get hijacked? Or like, how many of these things turn into, I went for a year, like examining Nexium and Landmark and all of these things. Like a lot of these personal development things that they turn into sex cults. And I'm kind of like, all right, is there a voluntary association that doesn't devolve into a sex cult or a suicide? You know what I mean? I actually started like, looking, what are the attributes of this? And then I kind of came to the conclusion that I ended up down the rat hole of, well, we need to work on morality. And then I started exploring natural law. So as I started going through like the consciousness exploration, which takes on meditation, but also can take on ayahuasca. There are a lot of different ways that you can investigate that, and I kind of like, all right, even looking at religions, when you back up, a lot of these religions have a lot of the same origin stories and everything else. And then as you dig back, the closest thing I can find is the root to this is like the Hermetic principles. So anyway, the whole point of Daylight was going to be to form a voluntary association, an organization to work on raising consciousness, but in a way that was preserved choice and individual solutions in a way that was not a cult. It wasn't pushing a methodology for raising consciousness. It was kind of a putting together a community where people could explore different alternatives and then share the information, basically. So that was the original concept of Daylight. And then COVID hit, and then I saw that my friends were being targeted by the federal government. And then I realized, well, it's pretty hard to focus on raising your consciousness when you have a technocracy that doesn't believe in free will, because I believe free will is the essence of consciousness. And so if you're actually dealing with a movement that doesn't even seem to value consciousness at all, then that's a problem. So in other words, all of this fighting CBDCs and doing all this stuff was a diversion on the way to trying to figure out ways of exploring consciousness.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah. So anyway, I didn't even know how I got there, other than that was the point of daylight. So, I do want to spend some time on that. I actually didn't put that into there's some really weird stuff. I don't know if you've heard of the Monroe Institute.
Yes, I have. Oh wait, no. I'm thinking of something completely different, I think. Who was it? Was it Zach that was just talking about the Monroe Institute? Fill me in. Give me the quick.
So the Monroe Institute was started by this guy, Bob Monroe, who was a wealthy guy who owned a bunch of radio stations, and then one day had an out-of-body experience and wondered what all that was about. Basically shook his foundation, but he was able to repeat having an out-of-body experience. And then he brought some other people in, including this guy, Tom Campbell, who is probably one of the least well-known people, and I don't know why. I've actually taken one of his courses. This is a guy who started out as an engineer and then took a class on transcendental meditation in the 60s or whatever, and then got to the point where like he can code and basically be in a meditative state at the same time. And interestingly enough, he worked on simulations for NASA. So he was he was able to use being in a meditative state to solve things related to these simulations that you wouldn't be able to just by brute force or logic alone. And so he ended up getting involved with Bob Monroe to try to come up with a way to reproduce for a broader audience getting into these different states of consciousness. And one of the things that they started experimenting with are called binaural beats. So basically, your brain can get into, alpha. When you're 0 to 7 years old, you're usually in an alpha state where you really aren't conscious. So whatever comes in, you believe, which is why kids can't differentiate between, imaginary friends and real friends. There's theta state, gamma state, which is kind of where monks get into when they're doing really deep meditation. Well, by using these binaural beats, they're able to help, but you basically have one frequency in one ear, another frequency in another ear, and they're off. And whatever that delta is that they're off is what the alpha or theta or whatever target brainwave state is. So you put these headphones in, and it basically ramps up your ability to get into these meditative states. And then they've got this.
I've tried various ones like that.
So they've got this whole gateway experience of like different levels of different meditations to do a variety of things. From what they're known for is remote viewing. And,
that's where I thought you were going. When you said Monroe, I was thinking of remote viewing, and the gentleman that was with the CIA, Army Intelligence, moved CIA, and went into the remote viewing. That's who I was thinking where you're going.
Yeah, so
it's kind of funny how maybe somewhere in my brain I had tied it back to that. I don't know where, but
well, it all ends up getting connected. You have Russell Targ, you have these people from the Stanford research group. So anyway, I spent a lot of time doing that and actually creating mind movies and using I started playing around with a lot of that. And this guy, Tom Campbell, wrote a book, My Theory of Everything. It's actually a big 3-volume set, but basically he was talking about simulation theory long before anybody else. And he's written 3 volumes about it. And it's really weird. I've taken one of his like advanced courses or whatever and gone through all of his various techniques. And he's really the intellectual horsepower behind Monroe, even though he split apart from it a long time ago. And nobody ever talks about him. And nobody ever gives him credit. When you hear people talking about simulation theory, you hear about Bostrom, or you'll hear Elon say, oh, well, the probability we're in a simulation is this. This guy's got a 3-volume set and techniques where you can kind of test and get into different states to do a whole variety of different things. So I would like to have Tom Campbell on, and I would actually like to explore
That'd be good.
some of this as well. The reason I don't talk about this is because people might think I'm nuts.
No, not at all. For my example, I would want to maximize my time when I'm sitting there writing or doing something at the computer or developing something, planning. And you find yourself sometimes with your best ideas is when you're in the shower. and what kind of music could I play that would get my mind into a focused state, binary beats or something to that effect, because you're changing your brain waves. And I would personally, I felt like I could in 30 minutes could get 2-3 hours worth of work done in 30 minutes if I could change my brain waves into that same pattern as when you're in the shower. And that's kind of where I had dovetailed into it, because I didn't want to go down the road of, marijuana or THC or whatever, anything like that. Didn't work for me for focus. And that's kind of where I was going. Years ago. And I still do that today. I put on my Bose headphones and I lock in with a particular sound or music that will get me to that state of intense focus and can knock out a lot more work. And I guess maybe I've consumed too much fluoride. I fried my gland or whatever. So I tend to slide towards atheism, I guess, and being an agnostic. And so I kind of go back and forth, but I still feel that no, there's got to be a complete interconnectedness amongst all of us in some way or some form. And so this kind of conversation is also very fascinating, and it goes back to what you mentioned on the podcast earlier today, where we need to kind of look back at ourselves as far as morals and ethics in the blockchain space, as well as in the recreation post collapse.
Absolutely.
Touch on that.
So this idea of, you end up in a lot of the same places when you go through what different meditation. I also did Dr. Joe Dispenza. We did a couple week-long meditation retreats. And I will tell so I was an atheist to the point where I was the CEO of the Atlas Society, so promoting Ayn Rand's philosophy. And so that's where I was up until about 2019. And my wife introduced me to a whole bunch of different stuff. But then I've had experiences where that completely, when you go through this process of realizing, well, they lied to us about this, they lied to us about this, they lied to us about this. But then you're kind of on this path where, well, I watched Penn and Teller's bullshit, so I think I'm above all of it because I'm an objectivist and I'm only dealing with objective reality. And then you realize, well, wait a minute, what if objective reality is actually bullshit? And then if you can actually have some experiences where it's like, okay, yeah, I like the material, so you can experience things where you're like, yeah, this is not you. I don't know what the answers are, but it was not what I thought it was, or what I was told. And there's so much missing. And this is I've stated this a lot. It's one of the things I don't like about Technocracy is it's a lot of left brain only psychopaths.
Right.
And left brain only is bad. It's good for certain things, but if you don't balance it out with the right brain, you don't actually get the big picture. You can focus on this small stuff, but that small stuff might be, complete and total tyranny. And so anyway, I ended up as I go through all this long exploration, and I'm like, you look at these mystery schools. So even like Plato, you ask, well, how did Plato and Aristotle, how did they do all of this? Like, how did Aristotle, you look at Aristotle's complete works, and you're like, okay, come on. And then you find out that they were in these mystery schools, and that there really is truly this occult or hidden knowledge. But part of the entry to getting into these mystery schools is you had to fast for 40 days. And I did a 37-day fast. I tried to do a 40-day fast.
Wow.
But I will tell you, I deliberately had the intention of really trying to kind of focus on right brain, activities. And it is so I guess what I would say is there is something to the right brain. There is something more to reality that we're not aware of. But my concern is that these technocrats, we're not. I'd like to build an AI that explores consciousness. Like to me, we should probably explore. We don't know fundamental questions about who we are or the nature of reality. And these guys are off saying, well, we're going to become gods and we're going to architect our own religious systems, and then we're going to create these technocratic outcomes where A lot of it is it's very deterministic, and that seems to me to miss the entire point of life, which is I want to figure out how to articulate this better, and it's hard to articulate this because I can understand what their position is because I was probably like that for most of the time, and now I know it's tragically wrong, and that we should be exploring a whole other avenue, and that seems to be getting closed off. And so anyway, I'm hoping to introduce some of these ideas and bring in some of these people that have been really influential to me over the last 2 years. Because what's been interesting, if I had to summarize last year, is, so for me it's weird. I've got my foot in these different networks. So it's like the one I'm in the privacy crypto space, or I'm in the Free State Project space, or then I'm in the Brownstone Institute space. So that I'm dealing with people tied to RFK and people that are going to be in the administration. And I will tell you, there's the interesting similarities, but then there are some gaps that it's and then how do you push the boundaries of some of these groups? Because I think if people could just expand out a little bit more, some interesting connections and ideas would come about. And I hope I can bring some of that about if I can get some of these guests to come on and we can get people to engage in stuff. So
no, out for it.
All right, let's see what Michael Yako does remote view. I've heard about
remote
him.
viewing.
Remote viewing is interesting.
It is. It's kind of another proof of concept that we are all connected, right? In some way, shape, or form.
The idea of a holographic.
Bring up the individual I'm thinking of, who was just recently on Sean White's show, Joe McMoneagle.
Joe McMoneagle. Yeah. Yep.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. The foremost, straight out of the CIA, but he was the foremost, I guess, remote viewer, and being able to nail it. So we're all connected some way, somehow.
And I took actually I signed up for and didn't take a class yet with a woman that worked with him on that. Like the whole on class and a whole process and technique. So to your point, when you talked about, like when you're in a shower, your brain is in a certain state, or if you've got the headphones in, or Edison used to get into a hypnagogic state where right before he would go to sleep, he would have a metal ball or something in his hand. And so when he fell asleep, the ball would drop and it would wake him up. So in other words, he'd remember whatever it was he was thinking,
last thing he was
in that state. And that's where he came up with a lot of his ideas. And Tesla
lucid dreaming. He was basically getting his brainwaves into a state to be able to do lucid dreaming. I had a good friend that I worked with years and years ago when I was in management at UPS, and he said that's how he was in IT, and when UPS was really just barely starting to get into the whole IT realm of things, because it was essentially just a trucking company. But he said that's how he, in college, figured out that he could solve different issues he was having in the code he was writing by learning how to do lucid dreaming. And that always stuck in my mind. And I've kind of come in and out of that by having such an intense problem that our solution, maybe a company I was managing, how are we going to solve this? How are we going to get through? Or a project I was managing, and you get into such intense thought and thinking about it, maybe for a few days in a row on that one problem, that sometime during the evening, during the night, you wake up and you have solved it, and you solved it in a lucid dream state. It's a fascinating thing to have happen to you. It's almost like an out of body experience, because that consciousness was out there somewhere and you were able to channel it and think it through, or you're maybe at a subconscious level. and come up with a solution. And it gives you just such vitality and energy to be able to put it on paper or type it up or implement it or tell the team, all right, this is a solution. This is how we're going to do it. And your energy level is peaked to, you have a greater ability to sell it to your managers that work for you, and they get that buy-in from you. It's an amazing. It has happened to me several times. So there's something to it.
My wife is like master level at this. Like she can check out, and she can just get. She's been meditating since like the 1970s, and she can just
amazing.
She can do all kinds of like just like weird, not weird stuff, but like she's really able to navigate these alternative states with, without any substances whatsoever, just by kind of like tuning in. And it's fascinating. It's harder for me. I have certainly had a number of experiences, but I can't just access it like she does, but I have. And I bought books and researched lucid dreaming in detail, all of the things that you can do. I mean, they even have, like blindfolds that have red light and that do things to actually trigger the state. And there's all of this research about people who would lucid dream and that they're weightlifting in the dream, or playing the piano in the lucid dream, and it actually carries over and enhances their capacity in the waking state. And then there's out of body experience as different from like astral projection. There's a whole like continuum of this stuff, and a continuum of these states. And I can't say that I've accessed many of them. I mean, I've had a lucid dream. I've had a kind of a partial out of body experience, but there's some people, you read these books. So the Monroe Institute has like a whole course and a whole variety of people. There's this guy, William Buhlman, his expertise is in near-death experiences. And then there's, somebody else that does, contacting, this gateway thing has 24 different tracks or programs to it. Anyway, it's fascinating stuff, and it's been released. So what you'll see on social media is the CIA admits that you can do astral projection. The CIA admits you can do remote viewing. This stuff's been known for like 40 years, and you literally can go to the Monroe Institute and sign up and either buy the audio stuff that you listen to yourself, or go to Virginia and spend time in like the sensory deprivation environment where you're actually going through a structured program where most people are successful.
In those takes, I've always wanted to do that. That's
where
you're floating. And you got the headphones and complete silence. And one other thing, my wife is a mental health clinician, and she's been trained on they're like clickers. And there's a name for it. I want to say CTB or something. I got it wrong on the algorithm but anyway, it's like a clicker, and it's going off in your hand. It's going right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. And the person is thinking of this, and then maybe a traumatic experience that they've had in their past. The therapist brings that up, and their brain is concentrating on this right, left click or vibration that's going off in their hand. And between that, I guess, getting their brain in a particular, frequency or theta wave or something, that then they're addressing in that state, in that brainwave state, they're introducing their traumatic moment that they've had in their life, or a hurdle that they're trying to get over. And it's had amazing results.
Wow.
So it's not just a some kind of quackery that's going on. No, someone has figured this out and have done a lot of research papers, and now it's for mental health clinicians, it's been introduced into that field, and there's a training and a certification that has to happen, as a therapist, to be able to use these tools in that manner. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I guess I want to explore. I've already explored a lot of the stuff. I just don't usually talk to people about this, but I think I want to start reintroducing some of it, because it's interesting. I would say so there's kind of this parallel. It's kind of like even what I'm doing with the CBDCs. So there's part of it that's trying to expose what's going on while proposing a solution, right? And then, you know, for a while I was like, all right, well, we need to come up with America 2.0 from first principles. And I actually gave a talk on this. I was trying to convince people that we're not going to fix this, and nobody was interested in this. And then I realized, well, you know what? Why am I even? I'm not really. I was like, I was intellectually interested in it for a while, but I'm like, but I wasn't. There was something. I've learned that if something's slowing me up, I should listen to it. I've definitely learned how to do that and to know when I'm on the right path. And that's how I kind of stumbled into network states. I'm like, oh yeah, this is really it. I don't really want to fix, like, even the idea of fixing this, or even starting with the idea of you really need to go back to truly first principles. And that's not even starting out with the presupposition that the U.S. is the right place. You know, fixing the U.S. is not the problem. That's not actually what you're trying to solve. But I guess I've been trying to express it in the podcast that I did with you earlier today and today. But it does come. But it comes down to me. It's like, okay, even if we fix the money, right? There are a lot of people that say, well, fix the money, fix the world. If we had sound money, it'll fix everything. I think in the absence of morality, nothing fixes anything.
Right.
And so I don't know how to talk about it, because people say, well, what is morality?
And everyone has their own definition or ethos, and yeah, it gets a little, I don't know.
They do,
well, because religion gets involved. Religion's going to get involved into that process, and then it's maximalism all over again.
Well, that's exactly right. But it does seem like there is some sort of natural law, and so there's there's kind
John
of yeah, I mean John Locke, but way before John Locke. I mean, I would talk about Hermetic principles. I mean, John Locke is I mean, yes.
Yeah, he's
talking about it in
century
in one flavor or another. I had Mark Passio on my show. I don't know if you saw that one.
I probably, you have to refresh my memory.
So Mark is a fascinating guy. Mark used to be a satanic priest. He was.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
He was recruited.
I want to say he was on Rice Crypto Show as well at one point, or somebody back in the day.
At various points. Yeah. Alex Jones has had him on. Alex Jones has had him like run workshops. He's a great speaker. He would do these big workshops, and basically what he said was he's recruited by LaVey, and he said they were basically trying to recruit him to be part of the Club of Rome working on eugenics programs. And so what he's been doing for the last 17 years, I have it right here. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. So he has this thing called the ARC. It's a hard drive where he's got 1,000 books and videos and just all the information that he's collected over the last 17 years kind of related to this. And so he's been trying to teach people about natural law and the Hermetic principles. And what was interesting is I independently 5 years ago.
Oh, you came to that.
I came to that conclusion. And then when I'm like, this guy's talking about this, and then he's done all this. So I got his hard drive. So he's a fascinating guy. He's based out of Philly. And but he's pissed. If you actually go to YouTube and you watch some of his last podcast, he rants and just goes off. I mean,
it's righteous anger. It's righteous anger.
It's righteous anger. But I mean, I mean, it was a little bit funny, and then I kind of feel bad for him because I know that he spent 17 years. I think he's right, probably. And it is this interesting challenge of I have no solutions when I say this, but what does gnaw at me is, yes, we have to stop CBDCs. Yes, we have to stop technocracy, and we have to implement these other things. But I will, time and time again, it's like we talked about today. Well, how do we restore integrity to the system? It's like we need to have integrity in these alternative systems, and these alternative systems have no integrity.
Right.
And so, and I don't know how to approach that. But this guy's been, he's been trying to do these workshops. He's trying to do shadow work, and all of it. By the way, this relates to that thing that I was trying to do with the original version of daylight, which is a lot of it is all about, getting rid of limiting beliefs. There is like a lot of these methodologies are very similar, like in an approach of, we are programmable beings. I mean, that is true. And
why they call it TV.
That is why they call it TV. And we're, but if we know that and we understand it, then we can program ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So this is literally true. So if you can, so part of what I was playing around with this Joe Dispenza stuff is he introduces this idea of a mind movie. So the idea behind a mind movie is it's like a vision board or whatever, where you come up with these affirmations and you match, visuals and everything else. Okay, well, what I did was I one-upped that, and where I'm like, I took binaural beats, what I learned from the Monroe Institute. I'm like, well, you can level that up. So if I want to get into theta or gamma or whatever, I can watch this mind movie in this state, and you realize, all right, I can either sit here and be programmed by Pfizer ads when I've just woken up in the morning or when I'm going to bed, and have that go directly into my consciousness without any conscious filtering whatsoever, and then wonder why I wake up. I actually literally fear my way into having a physical condition because of the, you know what I mean? Or
it's like willing yourself to death.
Yeah, willing yourself to death. So when you realize you can shut all that off and you can program yourself, okay, I got to that point, you can do that. Then the real interesting thing is, okay, what do you program?
Mm-hmm.
If
that's where you have to be very selective what you're watching, what you're listening to. Religion, a lot of religions will talk about that. And cults will do it as well.
And cults will do that as well. Okay. So now let's say you can turn off the external stuff, but if you're going to generate your own programming now, and if you think about AI, Mike Adams talked about this. So I'm going to get this, like I said, this NVIDIA $3,000 supercomputer. I'm going to get this, and it's going to be to the point where you type in a prompt and you will be able to create your own movie with the soundtrack just by using the prompt. You will be, so you can so again, you can program yourself. So now you get into the real work of, okay, well, I'm a programmable being. What do I really want to program? What is, and then you get into questions of, okay, well, what is the nature of reality? Because a lot of these, even if it's Dr. Joe or whatever, people are like, well, I want to be rich. Well, I mean, or I want to do this. And by the time you realize that you're programmable and everything else, you realize you're wanting to have all of this stuff is part of the program. The whole reason that you thought you needed, like Andrew Tate has been programmed and he's programming other people. You're not going to be happy once you have a Bugatti. That's all bullshit. So then when you realize, so then it becomes a real challenge. So I spent quite a bit of time after 2019, but before COVID, figuring out, okay, well, this is true. So I spent a lot of time getting rid of as many beliefs as I could. I mean, atheism, but everything. Then I had to realize everything that I thought that I learned in school. Oh, I thought I was smart in school. It's like, all right, I just learned a whole bunch of bullshit. Now I have to unlearn all of this. And so you start going down this, and there's like, so what do I actually proactively want to program? And that I'm still waiting for the answer on that. I'm still working on that. That really is a fascinating.
Well, I think that evolves over time as you grow, as you get older. If you have more different life experiences, you want to change your movie, what you're programming. Your life goals change as your children age, and next thing you know, you have grandchildren, and your goals change. Just like how you downsize your home, or you go on more you have more time to travel, or you choose to travel when you're young. Whatever the case is, your life experiences change your outlook and how you want to program yourself. So we're actually choosing by every waking moment that we think of what I want to do, what I want to watch, what I want to see, what I want to experience, is a choice. And so we're choosing to be programmed, or we're taking the lazy way and just turning on the TV, and whatever is fed to us is fed to us. Or we're taking the dopamine hit from our phones, or whatever the case is. It's a choice, right? But it's being able to step away from this, putting it down, and saying, no, I want to reprioritize my life based on where I'm at in this point in time. That I'm 60 years old and I now have a 2-year-old granddaughter, or whatever the case might be, and my priorities might have shifted or changed. So I think that's where the programming concept is, an ever changing what we want to insert into our movie. I know what Joe Dispenza talks about. It's good. He adds a little bit of the physics to it as well. So.
Oh yeah, he adds a whole bunch of very interesting explanations. But what I found is, once you get rid of your limiting beliefs, and once you realize you can let go of whatever this is at any point in time, yes, you may have made a whole bunch of decisions in the past. You can just let all of that go, and so you basically have more or less infinite possibility at any particular moment in time. Once you realize that, then it's kind of like, okay. I mean, it's, and I talk about this a lot, that this is one of the challenges with. The good news is, once you get there, it's exciting because you know that there is infinite potential. The problem that we have and one of the things I don't like about Technocracy is Technocracy wants to close off basically all choices. It doesn't. If we're programmable beings with infinite potential, and that by getting rid of our limiting beliefs, and then we can choose to learn new things and let go things, pick things up, they don't really want us to be able to have that range of experiences. They're actually trying to dictate the outcome and even what our behavior is. They're taking the choice out of it for us, but by claiming that because they're experts and they're leveraging technology, we're going to be making better decisions. But I think that the whole point might be that it's us making those decisions and actually learning from those decisions. That's that actual choosing that is the nature of consciousness. And if you get rid of that, I think that's a devastatingly bad thing at the level of destroying consciousness. That's actually why I don't like Technocracy. Like when I say it's about a battle for free will, literally it is a battle for free will. And so, again, if this were existing in a marketplace where you could choose to go down this path, but what they're doing isn't a marketplace, because it is and this is why it ends up revolving around energy credits. So they end up creating this architecture of, you can only make choices within this limited set of behaviors that are dictated by their control, which is a complete manufactured scarcity, over money, which is tied to energy credits. And it's a fascinatingly bad thing. But it's really hard to communicate this to people, because they're effective at the level of indoctrinating people at school to think you're going to destroy the planet and that you yourself are useless and your existence is destroying the planet. So now kids have anxiety. They don't want to have kids because they've had this drilled into them. And we've really gone off of tangent here, but not in a way. But not in a way, because I actually, I hopefully over the course of this year, I can explore, and we can get into different levels of truly how bad Technocracy is, and why people should be alarmed at it at a level of again, destruction of real free will. And because I think if people did understand it, more people would be passionate like I am about, okay, yeah. To me, it was a non-decision. I'm going to stop everything I'm doing. I'm going to write a book about CBDCs, and I'm going to try to onboard people to using these alternatives, because we can't vote our way out. And if there's one choke point that they have, is if they can't control our ability, our medium of exchange, and they can't control our ability, they can't stop our ability to engage in voluntary trade, then that's the best way to stop what they're doing. And that's kind of how my thought process got to where I am. And so that's still true, by the way. I actually still think that's the best. Agree. I think it's the best defensive strategy, but at the same time, it isn't. I still want to pursue the exploration of consciousness as well, because I think that's actually still a necessary part. This is just defensive. The implementing alternate currency it's a defensive strategy, but it's not really as much of a positive strategy, I guess. Anyway.
Providing a better alternative. Now it explains me. I'm really glad we've had this conversation and had taken it to this point, or to this, divergence, if you will, maybe a little bit, but because it explains the reason for the name Karma, and very appropriate. Well, there's a lot to say about that, but I think it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I'm looking forward to hearing and learning more about it.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, by the way, I mean, on that front, it actually took me a couple of months to come up with a name. That was actually the big, I've been working on this, other aspects of it for a long time, but the branding is really important. And so I was, it tied in hermetic principle, and I used AI a lot to try to like come up with AI is actually pretty bad at names. It's actually really bad at names.
I found it being bad at logos as well. So
it's getting better. It is getting better at logos, but we're in Mexico and we're at Mineratopia and we're waiting for a cab, and my wife said something and it wasn't related to the logo, but she said karma. And for whatever reason at that moment in time, that hit me. But I knew that if you want a brand, you want it to be like, this is a whole other long story that I learned about branding. You want something that's fanciful. You want something like, that's where you're either taking like BlackBerry or Apple, or where you're making up a word altogether. If it's something like, Weight Watchers, or if it's something that's generic, it's not going to be all that great. So she said karma. And of course I realized I'm not going to be able to get the karma brand name. But as I thought about it a little bit later, it's like, oh, karma, AU for gold. You throw that in there, and a big, money is just a reflection of our energy, right? Money is our energy, and so if you have good karma. So anyway, I loved what you could do with the branding of it, and so that I spent a lot of time on that. And I've been playing around with the rebrand of Daylight, which there's a new logo that I'm not 100% great on, but I was trying to reflect the same concepts of kind of raising consciousness. And I ended up boiling down. So I went from whatever this whole long spiritual journey process, meditation, going through all this, to the Hermetic principles, to somehow, and I don't even know how, summarizing this to free will, decentralization, love, and abundance. And I don't know how I got to that, but that's been effectively, and I'm not like, that could change. I'm not like, this is definitively it, but it's the simplest way I've been able to understand what's at play here. And the technocracy is the opposite of that. It's determination, it's fear, it's manufactured scarcity, and it's centralization. I mean, that's what it is. So anyway.
We'll got to wrap up here, but side note, while I'm thinking of it, are you familiar with eGold and Dr. Douglas Jackson, who started eGold back in 1996 and was shut down by the SEC? eGold.
Was it? Yes. Was it eGold? I thought it was something. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
We won't get into it, but just put a coat hanger on it and look up Dr. Douglas Jackson, E-Gold. He was a pioneer in asset tokenization of gold, but it was centralized, and his story is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, no, I am familiar with this, and I've looked at this as I've looked at this specifically. So yes, what is unlicensed money transmitter and everything else? I've looked at all of this. And by the way, now that doesn't mean they're not going to go.
He was shut down. It was illegal. He was wronged at so many levels.
Oh yeah. And by the way, sitting in on Ian Freeman's case and Roger's case and everything else, like certainly I've seen what their tactics are. This is why when I say the challenges here are legal, but when the redemption for the gold is done using KYC, everything else, you can do a distribution of this. And by the way, think about it. Tether is fraudulent, right? So I'm not trying to emulate Tether, but there are ways post the eGold world where if I'm selling, if I'm not selling Karma individually to people, if I'm selling to institutional investors that are exchanges, and where the exchanges have done whatever is legally required for them to do KYC, or if I'm working with a merchant system where there's a swap taking place, where so again, all of it. So I'm aware of his situation. Everything that I'm doing is above board based on the laws that exist right now, and I'm doing jurisdictions. Does that mean they won't come after me. I mean, again, also the implication of it is I'm going specifically after, farmers, and like it's merchants that are doing things that are like this. I don't think Silk Road, what he did was bad or wrong. I mean, I think it was a completely moral thing to do, but it's not surprising that they would make an example of him, and it's easy to make an example of him. But if you work within a complex legal framework, and your distribution model is that you're helping small businesses and merchants and farmers, and you're helping feed people, and you're helping people improve their health, it's going to be pretty hard to win a jury trial. Right. And again, by the way, I'm suggesting I'm going to follow. There is no money transmitter law. I'm not getting into money transmission. I'm not selling stuff to people without KYC. I'm and this is the beauty of what I think we've put together here, is that at least for a while, before they try to shut that down, think about how big it could be. If Tether's $138 billion, think about what the demand would be for actual gold-backed money that was private, that could be used with low fees.
No kidding.
So the other challenge with that is, can I get enough vaults, and can I get enough, can I buy enough gold, and can I, put in place enough mechanisms? I thought it was interesting that what we talked about today, what Lisa was talking about with this notch in the gold. I had not heard of that.
In the coins, the ridge on the coins, every one of them is almost like a serial number, because of the minute different changes as they're being printed, and the way the metal is smelted. Every coin is almost like a fingerprint. I never knew that either.
I've heard of it.
We were here talking about that.
I got to look into that today. What a great show. What a great group of people that you had on today.
Yeah, it was a really good show. Amazing.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should wrap up. I really appreciate you coming on, and especially with such short notice.
Likewise. I thank you so much for having me on. Again, I'm William, and my wife's name is Miriam, so that's how the I am for I am came from. The end of my first name and the end of my wife's first name. So it's William and Miriam. So I am for her as she is for me, and that's how it came about. So, and on X, it's I am for I am we, is how my tagline is on there. But so now you know, as William, where the I am came from for my wife and I.
Good. Awesome. Well, that's good to know. All right.
Thanks again, Aaron. I appreciate these conversations, and fascinating. You're on a great path there with how you laid it out tonight. Aggressive goals, and if anyone can do it, I know you can. I'm looking forward to when we meet in person. You can sign my book of the countdown.
I look forward to it. Well, hey, hopefully I'll have a new book. If I can get this done fast enough, we'll have another book too. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you next week.
We'll see you.
Oh, by the way, on that, just one last thing. I want to have Joe on next week, if he's available to talk about his case. I want to have Joe.
Oh, on next week, on your show next week, to talk about the case?
If he's ready to talk about the case, I want to help try to get promotion.
I think he might be limited just because he's probably what he can or can't say. But yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there are things he can say. You know who could speak openly is Greg, who's on World Blockchain Roundtable. His previous life, he was an attorney, and he's not a practicing attorney anymore, as Rivet has done well for him. So, but he's very, very familiar with the case and the SEC and the background and ETHgate and everything. He might be able to be someone that can speak more openly than where Joe is kind of sequestered.
Good to know. All right. Well, I will.
So reach out to Greg. Would be my suggestion if you want a little bit more inside information. Well, I don't know about insight. Well, yes, no.
Okay.
There you go.
Good.
There you go. If you want more details of the case, Greg would be a good person that could probably speak openly. He's been following it very closely.
Okay. Awesome. Will do. We'll follow up. Thanks.
All right.
Have a great night.
Thanks again. You too.
Bye.
Bye.